It's okay. Scalery. I'd like to welcome you all. I'd like to welcome members of the public that are joining us today. There's no public forum today, unfortunately. The meeting is going to be webcast, so please bear that in mind. Just to go over the emergency evacuation procedure again as a formality, in the event of an alarm sounding, please leave the room calmly via the lobby area and main front door of the City Hall. Turn right and walk down the ramp towards the cathedral, and the assembly point is in front of the cathedral. Item number 2 on the agenda is the 25-26 budget, medium-term financial planning, development saving proposals, general fund and housing revenue account, and this is a continued session from yesterday. I think I'm going to start just by doing a round of introductions again, so that for the benefit of the people that are watching from home, it's clear who's here today. So if I come to the right.
Good afternoon, Nick Hibbard, Chief Executive.
Kelvin Blake, Councillor for Hillfields and Labour representative on this committee.
Councillor Tony Dyer, Leader of the Council and Chair of Strategy and Resources Committee.
Barry Parsons, Councillor for Easton and Chair of the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee.
My name is Councillor Lorraine Francis. I'm Councillor for Eastfield Ward and Chair of Adult Social Care Committee.
Andy Rothery, Director of Finance and 151 Officer.
Sarah Chokovich, Head of Financial Management and Deputy 151 Officer.
Philip Walker, Head of Culture and Creative Industries.
Hugh Evans, Exec Director, Adults and Communities.
Medalee Jacobson, Director, Adult Social Care.
Tom Wilson, Interim Deputy Director of Commissioning. Sorry, no microphone. Good afternoon, Pete Anderson, Director of Property Assets and Infrastructure.
Rob Logan, Councillor for Philwood and Common Garden member of the committee.
Jonathan Hacker, Councillor for Stockwood, Vice Chair of the committee.
Councillor Heather Mack, Councillor for Lockleys and Deputy Leader of the Council. And I can confirm 21 people are watching online, which I'm quite impressed by.
Councillor Patrick McAllister, Councillor for Hotwells and Harbside Ward and member of the committee.
Jerome Thomas, one of the Green Councillors for Clifton and member of this committee.
Councillor Andrew Brown, member in Hengrove and Whitchurch Park Ward, and that's the only hat I'm wearing today.
Ian Hurd from the Policy Committee team.
And I'm Abdul Malik. I'm chair of today's meeting. So this is item 2 on the agenda, as I said, and so I'm just going to do some little bit of introduction comments so that we understand how this meeting is going to be feeding into the final budget on the 25th of February. So as indicated on the agenda, and as per the details included on the agenda papers, the Finance Subcommittee will today continue to review and discuss specific savings proposals across the Policy Committee remits. Policy Committee chairs and relevant directors or senior officers are here to respond to members' questions. Today's session, we will review saving proposals in relation to adult social care, strategy and resources, homes and housing delivery, including the housing revenue accounts proposals. Just to remind the members that the Finance Subcommittee's role over these 2 sessions is essentially to comment and make observations on the proposals. This subcommittee has no decision-making powers. Following today's meeting, our comments from across both our sessions will be reported formally to the 3rd of February meeting of the Strategy and Resources Committee. On the 3rd of February, the Strategy and Resources Committee will determine budget recommendations to be submitted to the full Council meeting on the 25th of February 2025. The full Council must agree a balanced budget. As per yesterday's session, as we work through the meeting, I suggest again that it would be helpful if we can identify those areas of the proposal savings where we feel we have clear consensus in terms of being appropriate for them to be taken forward. Inevitably, there may be some differences of political view about particular proposals, in which case we will need to be transparent about this and may need to reference in our report that there are different political views on that particular aspect and proposal. I would remind members again that we must all bear in mind and keep at the forefront of our considerations that all of the identified savings presented here are required currently to assist the ultimate delivery of the balanced budget. I'll now ask policy chairs to talk about their area, and then we can work through the saving proposals in the following order. I will come to you, Councillor Thomas, in a second. So today, adult social care is going to start now, and we're going to give about 40 minutes, but we will continue until 7 p.m. if we have to. So there is ample time for the three policy areas, I feel, to get through them. Councillor Thomas, did you want to say something?
Yes, I just want to make a general point, please, which is that, I think overall it's been a kind of good and comprehensive process. As I said in our kind of last kind of confidential meeting, I think the sooner we can get a date in the diary for a review of the process overall, the better, and set some pointers for the process next year. So there might be some things, for example, like blue sky thinking on income generation, which we would feed back in a review process. And let's keep those sorts of things out of the meeting today and focus on the agenda ahead of us. But the sooner we can get a date for that review meeting in the diary, the better.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thomas. That's very valuable comments, and we are going to be looking to take those forward, obviously, as you know, in future meetings of the finance subgroup. So if I now come to Councillor Francis, who chairs the adult social care policy area.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Finance Subcommittee, for allowing us the opportunity to go through this process. And obviously, you'll have the opportunity to ask the team any questions that you might have after I've just given you a general overview of the committee. So, adult social care is the largest single area of Bristol City Council's general fund budget, at around £200 million a year net spend. The adult social care budget represents between 40 and 45% of the expenditure of the council as a whole. As we all know, in recent years, the money available to councils has reduced, and at times, demand for health and social care, and at a time when demand for health and social care services has increased. The 2 years of COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent cost of living problems have been a major cause of this, especially when it comes to people experiencing mental ill health. As we know, as the population gets poorer and more concerned about aspects of their daily lives, their health and well-being suffers. Adult social care activity is underpinned by the requirements of the Care Act 2014, which makes clear the duty of councils with adult social services responsibility to ensure that the needs of people eligible for social care and support are met within a designated budget. Given the challenges at the moment, it is increasingly difficult for councils to do this, ensuring that the available resources are fairly used across the population. I don't know if that's me. Late in 2024, the Chancellor of the Exchequer's budget posed a major challenge to the cost of care. The additional cost of provision that will come with the increase in Sorry if it's me making funny noise. Late in 2024, the Chancellor of the Exchequer's budget posed a major challenge to the cost of care. The additional cost of provision that will come with the increase in employer national insurance contributions will put our adult social care budget under pressure and affect the stability of the care market. Bristol City Council adult social care spend on care market provision is around 186 million net per year. So each 1% in increase in cost makes a big difference. This budget requirement has not been funded by government, so the potentially large extra cost has to be funded by councils. The adult social care proposals within the MTF aim to address the challenges of increased demand and reduced available resources in the following way. 1. By addressing the demand for services, working in a strength-based way to help people to take control of their lives, of their care and support plans, and maintain their independence, and ensuring that when people receive adult social care, they get the right level of support in the right place at the right time. To underpin this, we are improving our structures and systems to be as effective as we can be. 2. By improving the supply of local social care services that meets people's needs. Through our new single commissioning framework, we are ensuring that Bristol can buy care and support a fair price. Local services are best for people, especially those that help them to live in their own homes and communities. We are helping the market to build service capacity in the city, so when we spend money on care and support, we create employment, skills and capability for Bristol. 3. As part of the improving supply, we must ensure that our local system of services is sufficient to meet the needs of the city, of acceptable quality to meet people's needs safely, and fairly priced to ensure value for the public money that we spend. We are proposing that we review the in-house services that the council directly provides as part of this to ensure that we are spending Bristol monies in the correct way. Finally, 4. By developing our work with key partners, especially the NHS, we make sure that our joint systems work as well as they can and that we fairly share the cost of things that we fund jointly. These proposals are challenging and won't be easy to achieve. They offer a measured and balanced range of actions that we think will enable us to improve our operational systems and processes so we can meet the needs of our population in the most efficient way. Thank you. Just change my glasses.
Thank you very much, Councillor Francis. I'm now going to come to members for questions. I think the way I'm going to do this is I'll ask each one of you to, and if you don't want to, you can pass, but that's probably going to be the best. So the first round, Kelvin first.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lorraine. Obviously, we recognise that there's significant pressures in this area, and meeting the continuing increasing demand is ever so difficult in such a kind of constraint environment. Obviously, the government has given us more money for adult social care over and above what we anticipated. Yet, I accept, and understand that some of our partners will be under significant pressure with their national insurance contributions that they need to make. So, and I recognise that may fall on us at some point. Turning to the proposals, there's quite a lot of good stuff in this. It's about getting the right care to the right people at the right time, and keeping people more independently living at home rather than in expensive residential care. And we support very much of those proposals in this paper. I think where the sort of difficulty or some questions I think that arises from this, because obviously the sort of detail that underpin this we haven't seen. Some of the assumptions related to some of the initiatives in this, and can I just turn straight away to the increase in Meals on Wheels costs and ask a question about that. We're suggesting that the paper sets out that it's a subsidised service. I think that's acceptable. Certainly if we landed all the costs on the individuals, it would be uneconomical for them to cover the costs of it. So I think we're accepting that it's a subsidised service. But for 100k, 15% increase is way above inflation, way above what people would expect to see as an increase. And my worry about this is that this is more than just a meal, it's a visit. And I was wondering if there's been any assessment done to understand that of the individuals that we provide a meal and a visit, how many of those individuals could fall back to us in a statutory way, could come into us because their health declines or because that visit's not there and they can't afford the meal, they could come to us where we have to provide additional care in their own home, or in fact they could come to us and they need a residential placement, which this 100k would be wiped out immediately if that were to happen. So understanding some of the sort of information behind this and what the risks associated with putting it up by 15% amongst a cohort of individuals that are not particularly wealthy. I've got a couple of other questions, but if I could ask that question first.
So, first and foremost, I am going to allow obviously suggest the officers answer this because, with respect, we are not. I just want to take issue with the premise that somehow if somebody wasn't given Meals on Wheels, that somehow that would then impact their housing, impact, all the other issues around them, and that's not the case. So the commissioning service has worked on this and they have come up with a reasonable solution to meet we will still continue to actually subsidise this group. It's not a case of the 15% going up means that the council will stop subsidising these meals. So I'll hand over to Meta.
Do you want to jump in?
Yeah. So Meta will just give you the more kind of detailed information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Francis. So, so I'm Meta and I'm responsible for our in-house provider services, which is where the community meals service sits. We do have extensive analysis of this, Councillor Blake, and we've, in fact, last year had an external consultancy help us with a commercial review of the service as well, because the service has been encouraged to think commercially about how it operates. It currently serves just under 300 people, about 50% of whom are having their meals provided privately, and about half are provided with their community meal as part of a Care Act eligible service. Some of the background history to this is that the community meals costs or fees have not been uplifted on an annual basis in any sort of strategic way or without reference to the actual cost of delivering the service. And so it has effectively fallen behind, and the gap between the cost of the service and the income that it collects has become greater over the years. It therefore has not taken account in the rise in fuel costs, the rise in the materials that go to making the meals, the cost of buying the frozen meals that we also use. And so what we're trying to do here is to make some inroads in bridging the gap into the service, which, as we say, is subsidised for private customers. We thought long and hard about the value of the uplift. 15% sounds like a big number. It is less than £1 per meal. And I think the reference was made quite correctly to the fact that this is not just a meal. This is a meal that's prepared, packed into a van, delivered to somebody's house, plated up, heated and served. And the price point for that does not take into account the comprehensive nature of what's actually being provided. So that would be my commentary. I hope that helps to answer the question.
I think that answers the question about the problem it is for us. I'm not sure whether or not you've answered the question, if I've been honest with you, Meta, about the sort of potential for anyone not being able to afford this increase, and therefore what would potentially happen. Have we tested this out there and understood that this is something that these individuals could easily absorb, right, and that they wouldn't then go without? I just wonder, it's the sort of it's the customer side of this process that I'm asking about, rather than the issue it is for us as an organisation providing it.
I'm going to answer, then I'll ask Hugh to step in. I think I'm going to, with respect, reiterate that no person who is eligible for care under the Care Act 2014 will go without adequate support, whether it's meals or whether it's domestic dom care, etc. Then that's not going to happen, and I don't want us to present to the public that we are somehow neglecting our duties to review services that are not that we're not reviewing our services and looking at alternative ways to provide meals or for our service users to access meals. No one is going to be left starving, Councillor Blake, with respect. So we need to I just want to emphasise that. So I'm going to hand over to Hugh to see if he'd like to add anything. Meta or Hugh, sorry.
Yes, I mean, I think it is a valid question. In the analysis that we had done last year, we did not find evidence that people would struggle if the meals service was not able to provide to them. That was not with the analysis was not done with a view to the fee increase specifically, but it was done as a comprehensive review of what was the risk, for instance, if we weren't able to deliver the service. We had no evidence to suggest that this was going to be a struggle for people. But we have not asked our private customers whether they can afford this uplift. We've not undertaken consultation in that respect.
Okay. Thank you. Just one other quick thing on the review of the current in-house services. That we've got savings in a few years' time of £1.5 million. I know that. I mean, the only way we can make savings, I guess, is if we lower the sort of provision to the individual, so it's a lesser cost, or staffing costs are reduced. And I just wondered, I know we've got to do the review. I know that's what you're suggesting here, but can you give us a sort of view of how we make up this £1.5 million of savings? What are the assumptions that underlie those figures?
I'm just going to start by saying that you've made two comments about the savings will impact on staff, and I can't remember the other one you said now. You said two things, but there is a series of savings that we have looked at, and it is not just about staffing, it's about how we're going to commission services and etc. So it is a series of things that will lead us to that final £1.5 million. So it is not. So I just want to be clear, we are not planning to dismiss staff holistically to sort of preserve that money, that savings. So we can go into more details, but can you specify specifically what areas you'd like us to address? Because we've got all the information. So is there some specific areas you'd like us to focus on?
Yeah, just if you can give me just a summary of the things that make up the £1.5 million of savings. What's your assumptions around
we'll hand over to you for that.
I'll just start by thanks, Cohen, Councillor Blake, and thanks, Councillor Francis. The initial point to make is that we have to review all of our services. It's our duty under the Care Act to ensure that we provide services of sufficient quantity and of adequate quality to meet the needs of the people of the city. And as a product of that, Tom and commissioning colleagues have to be regularly reviewing the entirety of our service provision to ensure that what we're doing in the best way to ensure best value for the money that we spend on behalf of Bristol. So sufficiency, quality and inequality, obviously in issues of safety in here, and then in regard to value for money, best value. We're saying at this stage that we're going to undertake a review of these services because as a whole, as a City Council, we haven't considered in sufficient depth our role as a direct provider of services. Most councils don't directly provide services in this way, so we are a little bit of an outlier in that regard. So a review is timely, number one. Number two, the resource saving element is a place marker. It's a comparatively small amount of money compared to the amount that we spend on these services, and one way or another, that amount of money will be delivered through efficiency or through other benefits that we gain through the activity that will happen beyond the review. But I want to be absolutely clear that nothing's decided as yet as to what actually will happen, because we've got a 2-year period within which we will conduct that review. I'll hand over to Meta just in case. Do you want to say anything more about it? Yeah.
Okay, so I'm happy to give it a bit of context if it would be helpful. Those of you who've been around for a while, and probably many of you much longer than I've been around in Bristol, will know that our in-house service portfolio used to be much, much, much bigger. And what's happened over time is that every year for the last many, many years, we have, as part of our budget planning and our efficiency savings planning, we have closed a service or two each year. What that means is that we've now got a much smaller portfolio of services, and for the benefit of the people that we support and for the benefit of our workforce, I think it's really important that we review and consider whether or not the council wishes to be a provider of adult social care services, and contend with that question so that when we do our planning going forward, that we're clear about what the strategic aim of the council is. That's really the root of the review. Hugh's right in saying that there are no predetermined destinations here. It's really important that we review in the context of the commissioning strategy that Tom and colleagues are responsible for, to see whether or not the contribution that our services make is the right contribution for the right value in our market. There is absolutely no question that the services that we currently provide are really highly welcomed and valued by the people that we support. And so this is not a question about whether the services are good or not. This is a strategic question about whether or not we should continue to provide services. And the care market moves on all of the time, and there may be opportunities for us to collaborate with other organisations. We work a lot in integration with the NHS, for instance, and there may be opportunities that we need to stop to consider for each of the services. And there may be different answers for each of the services, and nothing is predetermined. But we think there are opportunities for us to look at this strategically, as well as service by service.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add, during our work programme setting in December, where I believe it was myself and Councillor McCowie was present only, we made a really emphasis that we would have a full consultation around any proposed closures. We will not tolerate any kind of predetermination, and we will be consulting with all the relevant partners, stakeholders, etc., before any decision is made. Hence why I was just making a point that nobody will be left behind in the consultation around these 4 key services.
Thank you, Councillor Francis. Councillor. So if I can come to Councillor Brown, do you have any comments or questions?
Yeah, a couple. One sort of relates to the question we had yesterday of children and young people about the savings. Are these savings cash savings, or are they avoidance of additional costs that we might otherwise have incurred if if there wasn't constraints on demand? So that's the first one. The second one is, I appreciate the budget for this area is huge, and that you know, so whilst the numbers here are significant, they're again, you know, they have to be measured against the size of the budget. But that said, it still appears challenging. It is an area where there has been previous attempts to save and to reduce costs. So can you give us an assessment of which of these are the most challenging to, A, the feasibility of achieving these savings, and B, which are going to be the most challenging to achieve?
Right, just very briefly, yes, there's a combination. I mean, the numerical reflections that you get in the documentation are the amounts of money that we will be spending less as a product of this work. So you can call that cashable, but as it stands, it will come as a combination of not spending money that would have been spent and reducing the amount of money that's already being spent. So I don't want to automatically decry what people term non-cashable savings, because it all amounts to the same thing, which is that we're spending less money to deliver against our Care Act duties. So that's number one. Number two, I will let Tom jump in very briefly about, because it's about the care market. And the care market spend element of this is by far there's several savings that pertain to our spend in the care market. £186 million a year, as Lorraine said in the opening speech. And it's that bit that we really do need to address in order to reduce our overall commitment of resource. So Tom, do you want to come in on that? And then,
yeah, I'm hoping you can hear me. So I guess the first thing to say is there aren't really easy savings left anymore. There are those savings that we can guarantee because we are procuring a service at a price that we can say, what can you provide for this? So the cost there is a different level of service rather than financial. We can get those. The ones that I'm most concerned about in terms of feasibility, and I would say all of the savings have got harder as a result of the budget, because what the budget did for social care was increase both the real living wage and the national insurance costs. And there's a particular impact on national insurance costs for care workers, because they're often people that work part-time hours, and so the reduction in the threshold when you start paying national insurance has a particular issue. What that's done is effectively add somewhere between 8 and 11% to the cost of providing care, and that means that the savings where we were looking to reduce prices have got that much harder. The ones that I would say are really difficult are areas where spend has been increasing and we have to stop it increasing and turn it around. So supported accommodation and supported living are two in that situation, and that's about better prices, better commissioning, right sizing, and the work of practitioners to ensure people get the consistent level of service in a strength-based way, understanding what people can do for themselves as well as what they need support with. So yeah, really difficult. We wouldn't have put the savings if we didn't think we could deliver them, but absolutely this is challenging stuff.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think overall, I mean, it feels like there's a kind of good kind of policy framework for the cost management side, and I think there's kind of very positive work there. I think just kind of picking up again this theme that I mentioned yesterday, I mean, it's keeping to the budget and getting a budget which we feel we can agree to. I mean, I think only getting a budget overrun of 4% last year in the circumstances is, you know, it's a pretty good result, but that's still 7 million over budget. So how it is that you guys can kind of sign up to a budget that you really think you can deliver is what I would love to feel kind of confident about. I kind of echo the concerns that have been raised about employers NI that Kelvin raised, and just feeling that when there's a budget put forward that we've done realistic rather than kind of hopeful modelling on how that increase in employers NI is going to end up kind of hitting the council. I want to just kind of check on the kind of, again, picking up what we saw in Children Education Services yesterday, negotiating a fair deal with the NHS on funding arrangements. And I know, Hugh, you talked about that a bit in the kind of private sessions, but what do we think that the art of the possible might be there? It looks like it's about £2 million that you've got in total that could come from kind of a tough, fair negotiation with the NHS. But if that could be clarified, that would be great. And then I would kind of echo Meta's comments about the strategic approach on the core functions of the service. And going back to what I said earlier, I kind of see us channeling those sorts of comments into a review meeting for picking up in next year's process, rather than drilling down into the detail that we don't actually have at the moment. So maybe Lorraine or Hugh, you could come back on that NHS negotiation point.
Yeah, definitely one for Hugh. But I can assure you that we do talk about this a lot. The NHS contribution to social care. So, but Hugh will have the sort of more insight into that.
Yeah, thanks. It's a key point. And it was one of the areas, ensuring that fair shares are adhered to across the system. And, the transition between children and adults is an area where it's particularly apparent. So it's directly relevant to the conversations that I know were had yesterday. We have got very good working relationships with our colleagues in the NHS. And we have got good strategic conversations underway. That said, we don't shy away from difficult financial conversations and challenges when they're apparent. I think we're a good partner to our colleagues in the NHS. I think they recognise that. We have got a swathe of work underway around particularly Section 117 aftercare, which is services that people receive after they've had a period of time in acute sector mental health provision. That's one of the areas that's expanded really significantly for us as a system in BNSSG and for Bristol City Council's part of that. That is, the increase in cost there affects both the NHS and the council. Obviously, aside from what the particular divide, the split is of regards the share of the cost. And what we're doing is the kind of work that I think Tom referred to earlier on in regard to supported accommodation and supported living. They're the areas where people who are subject to Section 117 designation tend to end up. They're the areas for us that have increased significantly. And it's the same people. And we are doing a lot through the commissioning work to develop specialised supported accommodation and to use general needs accommodation more effectively to step people out of institutional care and into their own dwellings, where there's other sources of funding that can aid them, that can help support them, including housing benefit, etc. We're also doing a lot of work to build our local care market so that we've got much richer provision in our localities, so that provision can cater for people with higher level and more complex needs. If we're going to spend £5,000 a week on care and support for somebody, spend it in the city, build the city's skills, build the city's capabilities, and get the economic multiplier benefits from the money we're spending. The long and short of it is we've got a long way to go, but we will, through our general commissioning activity, reduce overall the cost of the services that we provide jointly between us and the NHS, and through that we will get the benefits that we want back. Beyond that, we'll have debates ongoing in regard to the fair shares. I can tell you detail about how we're doing that if you want outside of the meeting, but we have got a really detailed and good bit of work underway to do that at the moment with our colleagues.
Thanks very much. And can I also ask about people who might be in hospital occupying beds and that kind of crossover between, obviously it's better for the NHS for them not to be in hospital beds, but the cost then shifts from the NHS to us for that care provision, and whether that's a kind of a work stream that we're looking at, and what's the perspective on that?
It is, yes, certainly. We've got specialist mental health social workers that do work in that field. Also, obviously, in the mainstream of physical health services, through our transfer of care hubs to get people out of hospital who are who've been there through accident, illness or other emergency in their lives. So yes, we've got a lot of focus on that. As part of the work that we're doing on Section 117, we are putting together a multi-agency team with colleagues in AWP, the Mental Health Trust and the ICB, so that the clinical side of it is led by psychiatry, which is what it needs to be in order to properly work on and review cases of mental ill health. And we will have specialised social workers in there, and that work will help to ease the flow in the mental health part of the system as well. We will have to manage people in the community, whatever happens, however long it takes to get them out. And in doing that, we want to ensure that we pay a fair share for the costs of their care and ensure that their care is progressive so that they've given the opportunity to improve, their circumstances can get better, and in the end, they can live with lesser or no levels of care.
And I think it's fair to say as well that we've introduced social workers back into the hospital setting as well,
yes,
haven't we? Where they had been removed before. So them being in the hospital setting means assessment's going to be done much more in a timely way.
Thanks very much. That's very helpful. I mean, I think what I'm hearing is there's kind of an approach on kind of tough, fair negotiation with the NHS. That's great. And what we've got is kind of like two main headings, is the kind of mental care and the physical care side. And I'm not seeing, given the sums of money involved and the kind of targets that we might be setting, I'm not seeing that level of kind of granularity in the savings that are being proposed. And I think, given the sums of money involved, it would be good to get kind of better granularity there so that we can be focusing on, some numbers there for the benefit of everybody.
The targets are split up according to the separate areas. I don't know whether Tom or Mette, you want to come in detail. We have got the Section 117 element, which reflects that work around mental health. We've got the 65 plus element, which reflects the people that are quite often people that are coming out of hospital, as well as people that are living in residential and nursing care already. And we've got the younger adults targets that reflect those groups of people as well. So we have got several different savings lines that are all about different areas of activity for the different types of need.
That's great, thank you.
Happy to elaborate outside the meeting, of course.
Might be helpful, and yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor McAllister.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask about the proposal for changes to how home care services are planned and organised. I think this is the largest single item in the set of options. So it's really good. I think we're trying to do more work to enforce good standards and cost efficiency in the contracts. That's good. I think we can all get behind that. I asked a similar question in relation to children's procurement yesterday. Presumably the council's got quite a lot of buying power within Bristol as the main buyer of. Okay, see, the nod is a better response than I got from Christine yesterday. Is there scope for sort of using that buying power to try and drive down the costs and to impose our standards on the rest? Because I noted the reference to market disruption, and I'm wondering if that's more of a permanent thing or if we expect that will settle down after a nice period of creative destruction in the marketplace.
Do you want me to dive in? Yeah, so, Councillor Francis mentioned the single framework in her introduction, and that's probably best seen in the home care market. So we've gone from being in a position where Bristol couldn't meet the home care needs of the city, people being delayed, sometimes in hospital, to we've now got 144 providers of home care on the single framework. We have no delays in terms of home care whatsoever. However, what it hasn't done to the extent that it could is driven down prices, and that's because of the way that the prioritisation works was focused, only 40% was focused on price, and the way procurement works, 40% focus on price actually means price has almost no impact on who wins, because prices all tend to group together. You don't get anyone charging zero. So we are looking at running what we call a mini tender, which will put price as a higher ranking, and it will allow us to use that vibrant marketplace to encourage providers to come in lower. So Absolutely, that's using our market power to drive improvements. There's some other things we're looking at doing in home care, such as looking at people that have double up packages, so where 2 people are needed each time through the use of improved equipment. Then we're looking to see how that can only be 1, and lots of councils have had success with that. We'll look to see how that works. I've set up some meetings that we call market oversight meetings. Had one today specifically on home care, looking down the lists of all of the home care that is commissioned to look at where there might be opportunities, the types of things we're commissioning care for. So we're really taking a rigorous and focused attempt at both using the market tools we've got, our intelligence, our practice to really make sure people are getting the right care. As Councillor Blake said, the right care at the right time, and to get it at the right price. So that's one of the ones that I'm really confident that we've got things already in place to make it happen, and now it's about making them deliver.
Thank you. That's very encouraging, and I'm sure Councillor Logan enjoyed the nice words about procurement as well. I think I'll flag as well. I like that we think that's going to make things better for service users. But if I could just quickly come back to the part of my question about the status of the market and the overall health of the market, are we confident that the volatility in the market is going to subside over time? I'm seeing a nod, so that's good for me. Thank you. One more very quick point, if I may, Chair, please, on the supported accommodation savings proposals. I noted in the EQIA that there's the phrase supported accommodation can be an essential option, and I think we're all aware that there are no easy decisions here, but it is a real shame. I think that we are, that there is going to be potential savings options here as well, because I think this is a way we can keep people out of the very expensive care options, and I think it's a shame that we have to pit this sort of service against the financial difficulties that the council's facing, because a lot of these are inherently preventative measures of some kind. And that's all I really want to say as an observation.
So supported accommodation is actually our highest spend area across the adult social care. You break it down, I think it's 26% of the purchasing budget goes on supported accommodation, and the amount's actually gone up by over £7 million in the last year. So supported accommodation for adults with long-term conditions, mainly working age adults, is an area in which we haven't cracked the procurement yet. So we've mentioned specialised supported housing already, and that's part of what we're looking to separate out the accommodation from the care and support, so that we can get much better deals and much better costs. So this is absolutely not about saying that we are going to place fewer people in supported accommodation and therefore have them in residential care. It's about getting much better deals, much better rates. There's a thing called the MSIF, which is National Benchmark Information Market Sustainability Improvement Fund. And if you look at that, we are an outlier in terms of the amount we are paying for supported accommodation. So this is an area that we should be able to achieve savings, and we've got procurement efforts in place to drive it. As I said, this is one of the difficult ones because the spend has been going up sharply, and we need to stop that, and we're trying to do that through procurement and really intelligent interventions in the market.
Thank you. That's reassuring, actually. Just for my own understanding, is it the most expensive area because of the number of people in that sector, or is the care per person generally more expensive?
Both. But yes, you've been speaking to children's colleagues who routinely pay £6,000 per child. Some of our working age adult supported accommodation is now costing similar, and prices have been going up and up in recent years.
Is that per week?
Per week, yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Just to quickly jump in, this is classically why building local markets is essential. We spend, as was said earlier, 186 million a year. North Somerset, South Gloucestershire, between them spend about the same. The NHS spends 180 million a year on what they call funded care. Adding to that what's spent on children's services, and you're getting on towards £1 billion a year that's spent on care and support for vulnerable people and people with high level and complex needs. And that's a lot of purchasing power. And if you build local markets and incentivise local providers to provide in the manner that we want, then we'll get a much better set of unit costs, much better value, but also services that are much more bound in to the activity of the city, the voluntary and community sector work, etc., that will make for a much better menu of services for people to benefit from. And that's commissioning.
I just want to add again that within the sector itself, as in adult social care, you have a dedicated a range of workers that work in this field. Some are paid above market rate, above the minimum wage, and many are not. And people that work in this field do it because they care about people. So any of the proposed changes that we're suggesting, we're still putting people at the heart of the decision making. So that's really important to recognise that.
Thank you, Councillor McAllister. Councillor Mack?
I think my topics have been covered very well by other people, so happy to move on.
Thank you. Councillor Hucker.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be quite brief as well. Thank you, Lorraine, for bringing forward these proposals, and thanks to the officers as well. I would think that delivering savings in this area would be challenging, given the budget that has taken place. But if you think that these proposals are reasonable and deliverable, then I'm basically prepared to take that on trust. There's a couple of things that I just wanted to comment on. When I in our briefing, we were advised of the proposal to increase Meals on Wheels charges by 15%, and I did balk at that, but putting it into context, it doesn't seem completely unreasonable. The other thing that I wanted to ask you about was help when you need it, recommissioning help when you need it, because I've been lobbied by my constituents about this. We have 3 Brunel Care independent sheltered living sites in Stockwood, and 16 of my constituents have contacted me, and this is one. I would like to personally contact you as my local council representative to express how much this service means to me and how it would affect me if it was taken away. They seem to have the impression that it was going to be withdrawn, but the paper indicates that it's going to be recommissioned rather than withdrawn. So I was just looking for some assurance around that.
Thank you, Councillor Hucker. I'll just start and then I can hand over. The service has to be recommissioned, and that's what's going to happen. It's not a case of a particular service provider would continue just to do that indefinitely, forevermore. So we know that services have to be recommissioned at certain points in time, and that's what's going to happen. There is a little bit more underlining the potential changes, because we can't guarantee that the current providers will be the recommissioned service. So that's probably where some of the anxiety is coming from as well. I'd just like to hand over to Hugh, and he can just add a little bit more background. Oh, sorry, over to Tom. Sorry, Tom.
I'd be really happy to talk to you separately, but broadly speaking, the concerns are about the older people's element of the service. It's actually a service that supports across many different groups. Effectively, we have a relatively small contract that serves all of the older people of Bristol, and a considerably larger proportionally contract that supports the people living in specific sheltered housing blocks. So what's being proposed, or what's been decided, is that the service is no longer tied specifically to those sheltered blocks, but a larger contract is available to support all of the people in the city. So the reason for your resident contacting you is because they will be in one of the schemes that has the dedicated support at the moment. But in the future, if they have needs that are eligible for the service, they'll need to access the citywide service.
Okay, thanks for providing clarity on that. That does give me some reassurance. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hooker. Councillor Logan?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to Patrick for the shout out to procurement, which is always brightens my day. I'm not going to repeat your questions on home care, on commissioning in general. I would like to ask a specific question about specialist supported housing, because actually that's a really exciting project. It's a thing I think this city is pretty good at. And it's in the context of commissioning, it's an opportunity to actually change the market. It's an opportunity to say, here is a site where we have separated care and support and accommodation, and potentially, or almost always, a better care and support outcome for the individual, because they have their own front door, they have their own rental stream, which is good for everyone, and they have a better care solution. What I'm a little bit mystified about is that the profile of that is that there's significant impact planned for 2 years, and then nothing after that, which implies that we've got a couple of projects and maybe we haven't got any more, or maybe we've got a couple of buildings that we know about but we haven't thought about others, and that seems to be a missed opportunity. So is there a likelihood of a programme, or could there be a likelihood of a programme across the 5 years?
As far as we're concerned, this is just the beginning in regard to that. There'll be more than just the ones that are featured in the savings at present. We're commandeering quite a number of estates that the council is disposing of for purposes of specialised supported accommodation, and we're working with a range of registered providers, a growing range of registered providers, to do more. We've got at this stage, I think, probably something around 90 units in the pipeline of specialised supported housing. This is something that colleagues in Tom's team, this is nationally innovative. This is an area that we are breaking national ground with. The DHSC and MHCLG have been, Director General of Social Care came and spoke to us about this in Bristol, up at the Science Park. MHCLG equivalents likewise. What you see in the savings plan is a tentative first step, but there will be a lot more of that. So I don't know whether you've got anything to add to that detail-wise, Tom?
Just very simply to say, it's probably the most granular proposal, and the savings are those 90. We keep the team in place, we keep the work going, and there'll be a bigger pipeline. It might get broader as we go on, it might stay the same, but that's those specific schemes. But we absolutely believe by the time we get to the end of that, we'll have at least that many schemes again in the pipeline.
I was wondering if the leader wanted to comment on that.
Thanks, Councillor Logan. And I think the thing I'll just add to that is this also ties in the properties being made available for those conversions, and that requires us to make decisions about which properties are no longer suitable for their current purpose and make them available for Hugh and Lorraine's team to deliver them for this purpose. And I think that's part of the reason why you're seeing that drop off, is because we still have to have decisions that come to strategy and resources to release more properties going forward as well.
If there's anything that fills me with more joy than better and insightful procurement, it's identifying for a building for disposal, but then not selling it, and for finding a better use for it that actually has an impact for either adult care or children's care. There are a number of buildings in our estate which we could do something better with. So, and we should do, and we should be proud that we can do it well. Actually, just one thing on the help we need it thing. People kind of dish sheltered housing, and people have an idea that it's a bit of an old-fashioned model. If it's done well, it can be massively preventative, and it can support service users who would otherwise be receive care at a much younger age. So happy for you to change the model, happy for you to come up with a model that you're comfortable with, but the big thing is the communications with the service users. So that the moment they feel they're losing something, and that makes them feel that maybe the place where they live is not the place that they should live anymore, and that makes families really worried. So it's about how you give them confidence that they're going to have a service that they have confidence in and that does the things that sheltered housing does. It does not have to be done by someone who has any knowledge of your rent account, but it has to be someone who does things that are useful for that population. And it's mostly about communications. It's mostly about understanding what that client group needs. But thank you.
Just very briefly to say, absolutely, completely agree. Sheltered housing has a really important place. So does extra care, and another area that Bristol's been brilliant at is we've got lots of extra care schemes. Since the day I arrived, I'm looking at how we can maximise those services to be part of a really sustainable adult social care system that gives us long-term sustainability into the future with the right people living in the right services at the right time. The particular challenge on the sheltered housing is that we have a small number of schemes in the city that have that particular service and all the others don't. So it was about equity, equality and making sure that wherever you live in the city you can get a service. So that's why it's not about attacking sheltered housing, absolutely not.
Yeah, and I just want to add again, because I keep having to add again, that what Tom says is the absolute truth, that it's about making services equitable, about equalities across the board, so that we can share the sort of value that the Help and You Need It scheme has across the board, rather than just contained in a smaller area, because there's other people not getting the same support. So we just want the scheme to be a bit fairer. But Tom probably explained that a lot better than I just done. So thanks for your questions. Is there any more questions? Sorry, Chair. Through the chair.
Councillor Francis, thank you. Councillor Logan, thank you for your questions. Councillor Dyer, did you want to say something? Then I've got a question I would like to ask.
It was only very briefly. It was actually in response to something that was mentioned earlier on about the impact of national insurance. We have regular meeting with our One City partners, which includes several adult social care providers, and it is just to say they are very, very concerned about the impact it's had on their bottom line, and it's something we are going to be talking with them about, and that is, I think, one of the pressures that we face in terms of delivering our savings, in that we are reliant on the fees we have to pay for when we commission these sort of services. So it's just be where, as Lorraine has mentioned before, we are being very careful, but we're also being very certain about making sure we do in a way that is equitable.
Thank you, Councillor Zaya. I'm just going to ask the question that I've asked in private session, but also in a members' briefing, I think, where most members were present. In terms of the saving that's on the sheet as A012, which I think is it doesn't mention the single framework in there anymore. It refers to the technology-enabled care now, so tech solutions. Would that be the same saving that I'm talking about? It's where and it's one of the biggest areas of potential savings. One of the things that I want to refer to is that there is a large workforce that are impacted potentially from some of the work that we give them or we don't. You say there's 144 providers now, and obviously the mini tender process is going to mean that we're working on prices rather than keeping an eye on other things. Sometimes we might not draw our attention to. The Equalities Impact Assessment talks about the people we provide care for, but not for the people that provide the care. And one of the real concerns I have is that I've seen practically that within Eastern Ashley and Lawrence Hill, there are companies that are operating that provide home care services to the community, and I see a huge workforce from the BME community, the BAME community, and specifically very professional Somali women that are trained, that are working in this area. And I think that they would be disproportionately affected if we were to pull contracts. And I would really like you to kind of reassure me that there is a fair way of people bidding for these contracts, receiving the contracts, and also, obviously, the output, the care that the people are going to provide is going to be of the quality that we expect. What I want to add to that is some personal experience of the current kind of way that people are conducting their businesses. And we know that the Home Office has given incentive to people to employ people from abroad for this particular job at a reduced rate. And I feel that there are some big companies that are going to be profiteering out of this. And some of our local workforce, people that are in Bristol, Bristolian workers, will suffer as a result. So can you reassure me on that front, please? Thank you.
So Tom's going to answer this question because it's in his service area, and he will have a response to that.
So firstly, the initial driver, and the main driver for the mini competitions is that at the moment, what the single framework has done is focused the amount of care that is going to a very small number of organisations out of the 144. And because of our Care Act duties, because of the need to have a sustainable marketplace, we've been looking at a way to continue to encourage and enable providers to thrive, but slightly increase that. So the idea being that there'll be 3 locations, 3 localities, and there'll be a number, I think we're proposing 6 at the moment, in each that are equally sharing the work in those localities. So it's about not focusing on such a small number. So that will be better for more providers and more workforce, but it's still not going to guarantee care to 144 providers. So that's what we're looking at in terms of the commissioning model. We're doing that for Care Act and for the market, because there is a lot of turbulence in the market post single framework because we got so much more supplied than we expected. In terms of the position around local providers and local workers, at the moment on the framework, it doesn't specify that you need to have a local office, which is unusual. So in the mini competitions, one of the things that we are specifying is that you need to have a Bristol-based office. So again, that's more supportive of local businesses than the current arrangement that's in place. The challenge with overseas workers is not something that I'm probably best placed to go into today. What I would say is, as an adult social care commissioner, 3 years ago, it was getting harder and harder and harder to have home care. Since the visa relaxation on care workers, it suddenly got really easy. And it wasn't Bristol, and it wasn't just big providers, it's small providers too. There are a number of overseas workers. I understand that the visa situation has now changed, so it's about to get a lot harder again, but I think we're really at the start of that. What I would say is the council has been very proactively engaging with the Home Office, with the police, where any kind of behaviour that looks wrong has come up. We're working with partners around that to tackle that, to make sure that all of those workers' rights are being upheld.
Yeah, no, sorry, my point wasn't about foreign workers, and it was more to do with protecting the local workforce. In Bristol, we're very uniquely privileged to have a workforce that is made up of Somali women in particular that are trained to do the job.
It's unusual and it's brilliant. And companies like Primeways and Happy Care, companies like that have pushed forward with that. Primeways is our biggest provider. And I think it's only a 10-year-old company, and it's a Somali-led company. And I talk to other directors of adult social services in other places, and they are extremely envious of the fact that we've got this richness of supply of potential care workers. Companies tend to try and enlist overseas workers when they are short of staff. And that isn't really the case in Bristol. So whilst I think we have got 1 or 2 companies whose offices are based in Bristol that do recruit overseas workers, whenever there's an issue, Dave Toole, one of Tom's colleagues, it always assures me that actually they're not operating in Bristol using overseas workers because Bristol's got a good supply of its own staff. We won't get away from the fact that we're oversupplied, and we can't sustain an oversupplied market. It's not our responsibility to do so. We can't afford to do so. We're not the only people that use domiciliary care in Bristol. There's a big private market. There's lots of other people that use it as well. What I will say is, in the last year and a half, the number of hours a week of domiciliary care we do directly pay for has increased by about 10%, by about 2,000 hours, from about 24 to 26,000 a week, I think, something along those lines. So the amount that we use is increasing because we're reducing the amount that we spend in bedded care and other situations. But as I say, we're trying to organise it so it's fair, but we have to be realistic about what we can do in regard to an oversupplied market.
Thank you. And final question was about the care. The Equalities Impact Assessment points on the impact. 4.1 talks about home care and how black and minority ethnic people are underrepresented, even though they are sufferers of blood pressure, dementia and stroke and things that would probably usually result in home care, that they were underrepresented in that particular. And are we prepared in case something changes? And do we know what the factors are and why that happens?
We can look into that, interrogate it, and get back to you with more information. I haven't got our fingertips as to the reasons behind. One thing I will say is, from an assessment care management perspective, we work very hard to be person-centred and to ensure that people get the right care that they need when they present with needs.
And I mean, I can add, without we're going to get the information, but there are poor health outcomes for people from global majority. That's well documented. So whether that plays part of it, we don't know, but we would hope that any assessments being undertaken is being undertaken fairly and, you know, in line with the legal parameters that those undertaken Care Act assessments are meant to. So maybe there's an element of general poorer health outcomes, you know, from people like myself and yourself. So there we go.
Just to jump in, my excellent colleagues just informed me that in the inner city area, especially amongst the Somali population, there's a higher proportion of people that accept direct payments. So it may be that people elect to take direct payments and develop their own solutions rather than use the care solutions that we procure. So that might be one answer.
We can look at data.
And that probably explains it. Thank you very much, Councillor Francis. Do you want to just say anything to sum up, and then we'll go on to the next policy area?
Just to say thank you for your questions, and hopefully we have given a reasonable response to those questions. And if not, please do feel able to contact us so that we can expand on any of the questions that you gave, and if you didn't feel that our answers was strong enough, we will be able to provide the data, because this is all being managed really, really well under Meta and her service. And Hugh and Tom, so thank you very much, because we've worked really hard. And so I'm glad that we've managed to get this presentation over. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now go on to the next policy area. Would members like a break before we go on to the next policy area? Yeah? Okay, so we will now take a short break, and then we'll come back to strategy and resources, where Councillor Dyer will present. Thank you. Minutes, so we'll be back at 5:20. a couple of seconds to settle. So we're going to continue the session. We're going to now go to strategy and resources, and if I can call upon Councillor Dyer to introduce his policy area.
Thank you, Councillor Malik. What I'll do is just quickly give an overview in strategy and resources. It's going to be a very short overview because I'm conscious of time. And then there are some 24 different separate budget savings. So what I'm going to do is pick out the ones that are probably, I suspect, are going to generate the most questions. But obviously, committee members are more than welcome to ask questions about any of the different lines that are being brought forward. So, Strategy and Resources Committee is the resource committee that is automatically chaired by the Leader of Council. And part of the reason for that is because it has overall responsibility for finance and budgets. So ultimately, the responsibility for the budget setting falls with Strategy and Resources, and in particular with myself as chair of that Strategy and Resources Committee. I'll quickly list the areas that we cover because sometimes it's not always clear. So as well as finance and budgets, we also cover legal and statutory services, corporate services, performance monitoring, council-owned companies and innovation, the culture area, council's assets and property board, commercialisation, external relations, including with the government, with WECA and with our fellow core cities and others, devolution, city office and the One City Plan, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, city funds, which are our own investment funds, equalities, equality commissions, Women's Safe City, and we're also responsible for monitoring departmental performance, budgets and risk. So it's quite a wide area. Within that, the full extent of the proposals or the options that are coming forward for this finance subcommittee to comment on, if they were all taken forward to the maximum extent, it would be a saving of some £8 million per year for 25-26 and £14.5 million over the period of the medium-term financial plan. However, I very strongly suspect it won't be taken forward to its full extent for various reasons, some of which will become clear shortly. Couple of the areas I wanted to quickly touch upon is, of that 8 million for 25-26, most of it, 5.7 million, actually comes from one saving. But I don't expect I get many questions about it because essentially it's an easy one. This comes from the fact that Worcester City Council pools its business rates with our neighbouring authorities. And this allows the council to share the risks and rewards associated with fluctuations in business rates revenue. And by pooling, local authorities like ourselves can retain a greater share of business rates growth, and that provides an incentive to promote economic development within our area. The business rate pool has been performing particularly well, better than expected in fact, and as a result some funds are being released earlier in the life of the pool than expected. And this is recognised as additional income to Bristol, and in this case for 25-26 that'd be an additional income of 5.7 million, which as you can see is by far the bulk of what is coming from the Strategy and Resources Committee. Touching on some other areas which I'm sure we're going to get some questions about, and I welcome the opportunity to talk them through. What we've always said with the options coming forward, that this was never going to be a painless process, and there are options coming forward that none of us in this room would want to take forward if we can find a way of doing it differently. Amongst those, I'll pick out a couple in particular. One of them is, I'll talk in one go about three options, which is the temporary closure of 3 museums in Bristol, which is Blaise Castle Museum, the Georgian House, and the Red Lodge. What we have with these museums at the moment is they're only partially open. They're only open 2/3 of the year, and even then only for 4 days per week. The visitor numbers, I'm quite happy to provide. For Blaise Castle, there's about 18,000 visitors per year. A lot of that is incidental because what we found is a lot of people who are going to Blaise Castle Museum are actually going to the Blaise Castle estate, and the museum is an incidental part of that journey. The other 2 are in the centre of the city. That's the Georgian House and the Red Lodge building. The Georgian House attracts less than 9,000 visitors per year, whereas the Red Lodge gets just over 8,000. To put that into perspective, MSED and the Bristol Museum and Art Galleries receive 700,000 visits per year. So clearly, we need to look at how we are promoting these museums. If I'm being honest, it should have been done some time ago. We should have taken the opportunity to look at that and provide ourselves with some times. I will emphasise we're not looking to sell off any of these properties. In fact, for the Georgian House and Red Lodge, we cannot sell them off. They have title restrictions which prevent them being sold or significantly redeveloped for other purposes. Blaise Castle Estate potentially could be sold off, or potentially renovated or redesigned in some way, but that would be much further down the line if we were to take that course of action. The costs and savings include security and, in some cases, heating costs, because there are no plans to move out the collections, because as I said, this is essentially a mothballing exercise to give us time to come up with solutions. So the costs for moving the collections have not been budgeted for and would probably significantly outweigh the savings that would be made. So the purpose behind this is to build enough time to look at, or to continue the work we are doing at looking at alternative ways of funding the museums and also promoting the museums going forward. Also within the culture area, and my colleague behind me, Alex and Phil, will be able to give further details when we come to the questions as well. We also have the Culture Investment Programme. The option that is coming forward is to phase this programme out. All existing commitments will be honoured, but no new funding will be opened for council funds. What we are looking at, as with before, is looking at finding alternative ways of providing this funding if possible, and the staff team that are currently working on this will be refocused to actively drive new sources of funding. And then another one I think we should touch upon is, I'll give you some background to this. At the moment, the way the government measures the impact of the local government financial settlement is it uses a measurement called core spending power. And core spending power effectively looks at how much money a local authority effectively has to spend. In Bristol's case, that figure is 551 million, but of that 551 million, 300 million actually comes from local council taxpayers. And that is a long-term effect of an ever-increasing reliance being placed on council taxpayers to fund local authorities. Because of that, as council taxes continue to increase, that has put increasing pressure on households, particularly low-income households, to be able to pay their council tax. We introduced, as far back as 2013, and I say we as a council tax reduction scheme, and that council tax reduction scheme was designed to provide as much support as possible to low-income households. That scheme over time has become increasingly expensive in terms of the overall cost for the council, or through valuable in terms of its societal benefits. What you have in the papers is a cost for 25-26, which is a potential cost for a consultation, and then for the year after is a potential saving. However, what we are actually going to be doing is on Monday, Strategy and Resources will vote on the setting up of a working group to look at how we support low-income households. And what that is designed to do is not just to look at the council tax reduction scheme in isolation, but also look at other sources of funding, such as the Household Support Fund, a couple of other funds that we currently have, and other funds that may become available, so that we can take a structured look at how we can continue to support low-income households in the city in a way that does provide them with the support they need, whilst also being sustainable for us as a council. So that saving that is shown for 26-27, or through it shown in there as 3.4 million, it could just as easily be zero, it could just as easily be 4.4 million. That is why we want to set up the working group, to see if the working group was to be cross-party, working with officers, can come up with a better way of how we support those households in Worcester that are struggling to pay their council tax. Because at the same time, what we're also getting pressure from is other households who are paying their council tax wondering why the council is seeing its debt go up year after year. And in some cases, that is because we have simply got people in a position where they are unable to pay. And that's probably the key areas, but I'm more than happy to answer questions on any of the 24 saving items in the strategy and resources list.
Thank you, Councillor Dyer. I now open up the House for questions, but this time I'm going to start with Rob Logan.
That keeps us on our toes, doesn't it, Chair? Thank you. The museums, it seems like such a small saving considering the cultural damage that it does. And the assessment, something that I dislike is a saving before a plan. I think what we all want to do is to have a strategy for the direction. So in this case, a strategy for historic houses, to say, should we own them in the first place? What should we do with them? Who should look after them? How far should they be open? And I think that is kind of the direction that we're moving in. It just seems nuts to close them while we come up with a plan. Because the assessment I would like to know about is could we achieve a similar saving even by having them open less than they're open now, but not closed? Because the fact that we have to provide heating and security, it just seems nuts to have them open for 0 days. And has that assessment been made?
I'll hand over to Theo to answer in detail. I agree with the general principle. It would be good to be in a position that we'd actually done this previously, last year or the year before. And I think what we also need to look at is whether there's the opportunity to charge admittance, how we do that in such a way that we don't drive down the attendees and defeat that. So there needs to also be some marketing of these machines being available, because to me it does seem slightly ridiculous that we have Bristol Museum and Art Gallery with 700,000 visitors, and then you can just walk down the road and you have got the Georgian House or the Red Lodge. Obviously there's some work that needs to be done to identify how we can better drive trade from one to the other. But I'll let Phil or Alex come in to provide some detail.
Thank you for your question. And Chair, I think arguably having the review in place first would be the preferable way. And I guess that's just a reflective of where we are with our financial position, that this would realise some savings to do it this way. The review would look at the role the museums play in the city. They have a varying role. Having 2 city centre historic houses is different to perhaps Blaze, and Councillor Dye referred to that in his opening remarks. I think it's important to recognise that the saving as presented would predominantly come from staff savings. So whereas the collection would be managed, continue to be managed, and ideally having undertaken a review, they would be the houses would perhaps be managed by alternative organisations other than ourselves. The collections would stay in situ. They would still need to be managed while we undertake that review. So we can. The intention is that we are able to do that review, but it would, as presented, then they would have to. The houses would have to close first. In terms of alternatives, we've looked at alternatives. They wouldn't deliver the level of saving that this would. So whether closing further days or potentially charging entry, it would deliver something. It wouldn't deliver the magnitude of the saving put in front of you. So then it would be just a question of how do you balance the budget.
Yeah, I wonder if we might want to see a bit more of that. If most of the savings are staffing, it would seem to be surprising that you couldn't achieve a substantial proportion of that by reducing the availability. But the key thing is to have the plan first. I think that's the thing, and to have people involved with developing the plan who have an idea about how to do it in the future. So that, but thank you for that. Slightly niche question: AI. I know it's the sexiest thing in the world at the moment. Part of my day job actually was buying Europe's biggest supercomputer, so AI is an exciting thing for me. But the business case of spending 175,000 to save 193 seems like not an outstanding investment, given all the things that we need to do. So do we need to do that, and do we need to do that now?
Well, first of all, it's a pilot project, and I think that if it doesn't deliver, we actually get the money back anyway. But Tim, do you want to go into detail on that?
Yes, thank you. As Councillor Dye said, it's very much a pilot project. So we frame this as an investor-safe project, which means we're required to try and return the investment. But the number there is fairly notional to make sure that we're saying this can wash its own face. We're going to underwrite that. The plan would be from the transformation reserve. So that what we'd be looking at is a small set of early trials to understand the business case for various tool sets with a risk of sunk cost up to £175,000. What we'd be looking to do over the year is to use the results of that to build a business case and examine whether there is a bigger case for investment here. So we don't want to buy into the hype, but we don't want to ignore an emerging technology either. So this would give us that opportunity to safely explore some of the key tool sets, understand what they produce in reality, and then hopefully build a bigger investor-safe business case or an investment case for future years.
Okay, I'm conscious that other people will want to comment. I just want to say I'm pleased that a report is coming to the strategy and resources on the future of the council tax reduction in terms of impact on low-income households. So that is a thing which we need to know before we make final decisions. So I'm pleased that that's happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Logan. Councillor Hucko, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Leader, for your comments. On the museums, I have to say that given that it's a relatively small saving, it's something I think that would be very difficult to support. I think that of all the different things that are listed in the document, the closure of the 3 museums I find to be particularly unpalatable, and ideally I'd like to see those taken out. I'm not convinced that given there would be costs to mothballing the museums, that it would really be worth closing them. And I wonder if we could possibly look at, I'm aware of the fact that that the city has a art collection which is worth 134 million, and if we sold 5% of that, you could be talking of 6 or 7 million. I might be talking off the wall, but I'd rather see that looked at before the museums were closed. As far as the policy, strategy and digital directorate is concerned, I notice that there's a saving in there of 100,000, but there isn't any details provided on how that can be achieved. So I would be interested in some detail on that. I would have thought that maybe there was some scope within the International Affairs Department or the Communications Department or the design team, but I don't know if those are the areas that you're looking at. You might be looking elsewhere, Tim, within your directorate. And just the other thing that I would like to say is that I do think that the council tax reduction scheme needs to be reformed to bring us into line with other core cities. I say this reluctantly because obviously the sort of poorest and most vulnerable, those that are struggling financially in the city should be protected. But I think we are out of line with other core cities, and I don't think there's any reason why we should be out of line with other core cities. It is something which obviously I do find difficult, because ideally we would like to keep it and we would like to fully fund it. Don't think that I'm a Tory without a heart who would just like to access, because I do have some compassion, but I do think that we should be more in line with other core cities.
I hear what you're saying, Jonathan, and there is a case to be made for, in some instances, for us being in line with other core cities. For example, one area where I would love to see us in line with other core cities is for us to get the same, to be funded so that we have the same level of core spending power per person as every other core city. Because if we did that, we would have another £39 million in our budget, and we probably won't be having these type of conversations. But also I think we have to face up to the reality that for a number of years now, we have seen drastic reductions to funding for local authorities. At the moment, in this transitional budget from the new government, that hasn't really changed much, but I'm hoping that for the comprehensive spending review, that will begin to change. But we are where we are at the moment. In terms of the council tax reduction scheme being brought in touch, in line with what other authorities are, I have ambition for Bristol to be better than the other core cities, and I think we do need to look after the most vulnerable in our city. I also have a responsibility as leader of the council to make sure we do that in a way that is sustainable, and that is why we're setting up this working group to try and find the best way possible so that we can support those people who need help, while also making sure we do that in a sustainable way for the city's finances. In terms of the question about the review of policy, strategy and digital management, at the moment that review, and Tim may want to come in on this a bit further, is covering a wide area of what we can do. And what I also say, to be fair to Tim, is that we've already taken quite a lot of stuff out of his budget already, to the point that he's now probably having to wear the same suit on consecutive days. Tim?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so to pick up the review of management, that looks like a very round number. It is actually a very specific proposal. I would look to the Chair because as happy as I am to share that, it pertains to individual employment matters, so I think we'd almost need to be an exempt before I could give you the detail at this current time. But once that's been shared fully with staff, I'm very happy to share the detail of that proposal, because that is moving in real time. And just to pick up your comments about communications and international, probably worth me saying at this point that we restructured communications in the last couple of years. I don't have the number to hand, but it was just over 300,000, I think, taken in that saving. That also combined 2 senior management roles. We had a head of policy and public affairs and a head of external communications and consultation that was combined into one role as part of that review. So just to reassure you, we have looked there for savings. In the established current MTFP, there is also a saving against networking, influence and partnership services, which includes communications and the international service. That already has a target next year of £150,000 of savings. So we're currently working on the savings plan for that, so that there will indeed be savings there next year.
Can I just add one more thing as well? Because as Tim kind of mentioned, this is also about people. Some of these options, if taken forward, will result in potentially in people losing their jobs. And that's why I think we all have a responsibility to make sure that when we talk about what is being presented to this committee, that they are only options, that it's disappointing to see something said in the press that describe them as if they are definitely happen. Don't do that. These are people's jobs. We need to be honest with people, and that's why we've made some of these details available, because we wanted to make sure that the staff who may be affected were informed.
Yes, thank you, Tony. Thanks for your comments on all of that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hugo. Councillor Mack.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about museums. I mean, I do agree. I do agree that a strategy is a good place, but I also think that having a savings target helps focus on that strategy and have something to really look at. And I also, I know it is a small saving compared to some other things, but I also look at our services and look at what we're providing through a lens of those who most rely on council services and where are we spending the money and where are we taking the money. And this talk and the press focus and everything on, for example, museums and saying, oh, well, council tax reduction scheme, as someone, as one of those people, one of those families who did rely on council services, whether that's benefits, whether that council housing, children's services, and all of these other items that we are struggling to pay for and are cutting right now. And as I say, my focus would be that we are spending our money on those families and those services that people absolutely rely on and change their lives. Those are the things that are on this list. And, me and Tony are coming back to council tax reduction scheme and what and how and what that looks like and what money we might be getting from the government in the spring. Can we wait? Can we wait and make decisions? Can we wait and discuss that? Can we not commit to things to see if our finances do look more sustainable? We are getting that money at a later point. And I just want us to stay focused that there are people who these benefits or that council housing, that is changing families' lives. And I'm not saying that museums aren't important. They are important. We have a rich variety of museums in this city. And I just want us to be focused on what our core purpose and what the biggest impact we're making on people's lives. And sorry, I don't have any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. Councillor McAllister.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to jump around a bit if that's all right, but on the council tax reduction scheme issue, it is quite deeply distressing that we're in this space again. I want to focus specifically on that £50,000 we're going to be spending on the consultation. When we were in this space...
Potentially.
Apologies, you're quite right. But when we were in this space under the last administration, considering savings on the council tax reduction scheme, frankly, from my perspective as a member of the finance subcommittee then, my impression was it would probably have happened if the consultation had given a clearer answer in one way or the other, but it was designed in such a way that you couldn't really tell what it was saying, or equally you could spin any answer you wanted from it. So if we can make sure that if this goes ahead, the consultation is designed appropriately, not by a committee of councillors, frankly, and that we're sure that we'll be able to get a good steer from the people of Bristol on what they want to happen with this and what they might want, money from that potential saving to go into. We need to get that consultation right first and foremost, because otherwise we'll be left completely rudderless with actually implementing the saving later on. And I've got a couple of other points, but if you want to come back on that. So.
No, I very much agree. I think there is. I think we have to admit that as a council, we do have a problem with members of the public trusting us when it comes to consultation. I don't think we're unique in that. I think you find that in pretty much any local authority, there is a tendency towards mistrust when the council comes consulting, that it doesn't matter what you say, the council has already made its decision. And I want to make sure that if we do decide to go out and consult, that we are very clear about what the options are, and we are very clear about making sure that, in particular, we reach out to those people who be most affected, because it's easier to say, yes, we'll stop or change the council tax reduction scheme if it has absolutely zero effect on you directly. So I think there's also a case here about making sure we reach out to the people that most need to respond to any consultation about how we proceed further down the line.
Thank you. That is reassuring to hear. I'll touch on the museums just because that's the done thing, I think. Georgian House Museum is in my ward. I've been there. It's a fantastic place. I am wondering, has the council or will the council be able to explore options such as bequeathing these or lending them to bodies like the National Trust? I know there are title restrictions, but I'm sure there's ways we can draft contracts to get around them. Just so even if the council wouldn't get the benefit of ticket payments or the gift shop or so on, they would remain open for the people of Bristol and maybe get some more advertising to them as well.
I think some work has been done on that, but Phil, do you want to, because you've looked at it more closely?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so there are options being explored around that, and there's discussions with a number of potential stakeholders about the future governance of all three of the historic houses. So it's early stages. I can't say that that a solution's been found, but there's ongoing discussions around that, and we're also talking to stakeholders, including funders as well.
Also, with Phil's comment, it reminded me. I mean, we keep talking about these buildings as museums. We have to remember they are historic houses of their own right as well. So they are listed. So that kind of in many ways should be open us to focus our minds on how we keep them open. But we need to do that in a way that is done in a financially sustainable way as well.
Thank you. I will quickly echo everything that Rob said about the AI pilot. I think he summed up my questions very well there. On the Cultural Investment Fund, the programme, I've had emails about this. I'm sure many of us have as well. Not a situation any of us want to be in, I'm sure, again, like with many things in these options. But with this in particular, Bristol's got such a vibrant and strong and important cultural scene. I would worry we would risk damaging the city's economy by a greater value than we are proposing to save from this budget. I know that we're seeing that across all areas of the council. We're seeing where council cuts money and then that results in more costs later on because we're in that sort of short-term cycle of thinking, unfortunately, and we have been for several years now. Is there a way we can try and mitigate this cliff edge even, because it seems quite sudden over only a couple of years now? Is there a way we can try and lengthen that out just so the city has got more time to adjust and potentially seek other external sources of funding to the council.
Okay, what I will say before I pass over to either Alex or Phil is what I said at the beginning is this isn't stopping anybody who is currently getting funding. Anybody who's already getting funding, that continue. They will continue to get their funding. What we won't do is provide award any additional funding. But Alex and Phil may want to provide more details about that.
Thank you for your question. Thank you, Chair. So I think, as Councillor Dye said, this is about honouring existing commitments and but not opening any future rounds of funding. We are looking at how we can, as we step down and phase out, introduce alternatives that wouldn't rely necessarily on council funds. That could be from other public sector organisations, which would be difficult. It could be from other partners in the city. It could be financial. Some of it could be non-financial. So we are developing some ideas around that we'd like to explore. Because yes, I recognise it absolutely has an important role to play in the city. But we just don't have that as a resolved plan at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor McAllister. Councillor Thomas.
Thanks very much, Tony. It's helpful to hear those visitor numbers. I know it's not necessarily a measure of popularity. I've had one email on the museums, and as a Clifton councillor, I might have expected more. But when you've got kind of visitor numbers of less than 30 a day, that usage doesn't seem to be there, particularly on Red Lodge, which I've never been to, but Georgian House and Blaze I have. So I'll go and kind of visit Red Lodge, and I'm curious how many times councillors here have actually visited those museums. I think...
But you can't at the moment because it's closed, and has been since before December.
Okay. I think I'm kind of broadly supportive of the kind of work that's gone into these proposals and what's come forward. I think my comments would be more about kind of proposals that I feel might be missing. And what we've got is a strategy and resources approach with things which sit under the strategy and resource budget heading, rather than necessarily taking a kind of strategic, organisational, longer-term, entrepreneurial. So things like tourist tax, or a more strategic approach on AI. What we're doing, what's coming forward at the moment is absolutely minimal compared to what other organisations are thinking about in terms of the potential of AI. But I don't think that is something for here. I think that's something for a review meeting where we'd feed back into a future process. So, thank you for the work that's been done.
Can I just quickly comment on that? Because we're now in part 2, and there have been a number of proposals that have come forward. And a number of those proposals, as well as being savings, also are part of longer-term strategies, whether that be looking at the future of waste services, future of library services, the family-first approach, what Lorraine's doing in adult social care, what Barry will probably talk about in his area. So I wouldn't want you to get the impression there is not quite a lot of strategic work that's being done. Quite a bit of the work has been done underneath strategy and resources. It includes the launching of a cultural working group, which will create a new cultural strategy. We're also working on a new corporate strategy. We're also revising the One City plan. Councillor Mack is heading up the property working group and is likely to play a major role in the supporting low-income households working group. So there is quite a lot of strategic work that is going on. Perhaps we haven't shouted about it enough at the time being. But what has also been going on quite a bit of is putting in the management controls and processes to make sure that next year we're not in the same situation.
Thanks very much, Tony. I mean, that sounds very encouraging. And I think with the emergence of the committee model, there's a danger that we get a more fragmented, less organisational wide approach. And I think, you know, one of the challenges from a review back to strategy and resources would be that we need to make sure that we're taking a really joined up approach across the organisation, rather than run the risk of fragmentation across multiple committees and lose sight of what can be done at an organisational system-wide level.
Yeah, and my further comment on that is that that may be a view from the outside to a certain extent, because one of the things that we were discussing earlier on was about supported housing, and that's been a cross-committee piece of work that has involved the Barry's committee, has involved my committee, and obviously has involved Lorraine's committee as well. And Andrew has been working on stuff that is having cross-committee impact as well. So I think, as I said before, maybe there's a piece of work we need to do about communicating more widely the cross-holistic work that we're doing in quite a few areas.
Thank you. I think that would be really helpful.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Yeah, just to pick up on that, it is something that we probably do need to have that sort of more communication piece around, both between about the work that goes on between chairs and the discussions that happen between the chairs of committees in terms of helping address those interconnected issues, but also communicating that out to their individual committees and more broadly. Right, so seeing as we're reporting this, I've been to the Red Lodge a couple of times, I've been to Blaze, I've never been to the Georgian House. Every time I've been in the market to go to the Georgian House, it's been closed, which might have been part of the problem here. One of the times I went to the Red Lodge as well, I wanted to give a donation. Wanted to do it by card because it's 2020s and I don't carry cash, and it was actually quite hard work to find someone to put it through on the appropriate tab on the machine, and so that was might be part of the problems here as well. So I share the concerns about closing it pending finding a solution rather than finding a solution pending them off, pending passing it on. But hopefully, whatever happens, we can find a more permanent solution that retains public access to those buildings, as museums, as historic houses. I also have share some of the concerns that have already been talked about in terms of the council tax reduction scheme. Like some of my colleagues, I sat on the finance task group as was, and the council tax looked at the consultation process that the council tax reduction scheme has gone through before, and it's a real challenge with a lot of issues to unpack. So hopefully the low-income household, whatever the working group's being called in terms of low-income household support, will be able to help unpack those issues and look at them in the round with some of those other funds that are available to maybe help support them. So it's like just a broader view of the topic. So I look forward to interest to see what comes out of that. I'm going to ask about one of the smaller cuts, though. There is a cut to the vacancy for the independent shareholder advisor position to the shareholder group, because it's been deemed that can be permanently deleted. So it is a very small cut. What I want to ask is about the risk that given the position of having external companies, given previous experience with Bristol Energy, which I appreciate was a different type of company to the ones that we have now. We've got a more streamlined, situation in terms of external companies, and they're of a different nature. But I just want to push back a bit on that and just check that it's not going to leave the council exposed to unnecessary risk.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I think the situation with the independent shareholder position, we were very lucky with the person we had. They were a brilliant and very experienced individual, and it's our misfortune that the Republic of Ireland claimed her back for themselves, because she was an excellent source and support. I think you kind of touched on part of the answer. Fee being now, when she was at a period of time where there was considerable amount of change happening with, I don't know if I'm allowed to say the word Worcester Energy anymore, but there was that. There was also, if you remember, we had some earlier problems with Worcester Waste with a change of directors on a regular basis. And we then had Gorham Homes with its initial teething problems as well. I think that has become our portfolio of companies is now essentially down to Worcester Waste and Gorham Homes, who are both operating in areas in which we do have some cancer expertise. And at the same time, we do have Bristol Holding and the directors of Bristol Holding to also play that role of providing advice and experience. And of course, we do have some non-executive directors who are councillors who also sit on the companies as well, mentioning their names, Jonathan. So I think as it stands, we're probably covered okay in terms of the level of support that we get. But if we do, at some point in the future, go down the line of creating additional companies, then that would have to be revisited. I know there has been talks for some time about the potential of setting up a second housing company rather than being a builder of housing, which is what Gorham does. This would be a holder of housing. And part of the reason for doing that was because of our major problems with the loss of our subsidy for temporary accommodation, which is still and remains a major problem, becoming a little bit easier because of the work that Barry is doing in his area, but still a major problem. So I think at the moment, the general feeling is that we don't need to replace that role, but we may need to revisit if we add any additional companies onto that shareholding.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, just the other comment as well is about council tax, is that I do feel a little bit that we're missing the elephant in the room, which is that council tax is an incredibly regressive way of taxing people locally, and that what we should be doing is either reforming it or lobbying government to reinstate the council tax benefit that we had up until 2013.
Thank you. Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I mean, if we're going to be proud of anything as a council, it's about protecting the most vulnerable people in our society. And if I'm being honest with you, we just need to find a way to not implement this council tax reduction cut. I mean, I come from a community in the West. You know how difficult it is for families in those areas to bring up their families in a sort of way, and this would really go to the heart of some really difficult situations. So I feel very passionate about the fact that, and I couldn't care less that we're an outlier, right? That's because we've had basically, quite frankly, left of centre politicians running this city, right, that have protected stuff like this, amongst a time when we've had massive cuts in local government funding. That's the reason why we're out. Same in adult social care. I get frustrated when officers sometimes say, oh, we're a bit of an outlier in our discretionary payment stuff. It's because we've protected those things, and I think we should be proud of them. Actually, I'm proud that we've got to a situation as of today where we've not done that cut. And that's where I feel. So I feel very passionate about that, and I feel that, to be honest with you, I do get the sense that you feel the same, Tony and Heather. So But we do need to just find a way of not implementing that simply because of the impact it will have on individuals. I've got a couple of other comments to make. The AI stuff, I worked in that technology, that was my job, and it's all very well been at the cutting edge, but we don't want to be at the bleeding edge, right? What I mean by that is that there's going to be a sense that there's going to be a lot of national focus on this and potentially more money coming down the line to implement ideas around this, but I would perhaps think that we would be better to be in a sort of second wave of that. It's a small amount of money, and I understand that, but it's almost, I don't quite know, I'm blind to the fact about how much work's been done on this already. Is it worth waiting to see others, lead the way, and we learn from that and we get better return on investment, essentially? And I know you said we'll get the money back anyway, but I just feel sometimes, there's a need, or there's a sort of want to be at the very cutting edge of this stuff, and sometimes it's better to let some others lead the way and we learn the lessons around that. I mean, on the museums, I really have a sense that that we do need that plan in place before we do the cuts. Simply because I'm not sort of doing a disservice to the team here on Rosterville. I'm sure they've thought about how we work with these museums, with the other sort of cultural offerings we've got in the city. I sit on the board of the SS Great Britain. I don't know how much conversations there's been about how do we share visitors, how do we signpost people from one experience to another. I'm sure some of that work's been done, but I think we ought to be thinking about a plan that's more ambitious around that actually can we offer, the ability that is in a visitor experience. You may go to the SS Great Britain and you kind of get signposted afterwards. So, I don't want to do a disservice to the officers around this, but I do feel that we ought to just pause a bit on this, try and have a think about the plan, and then look at how we maybe do some joint work with other providers to try and offload some of the costs a bit further down the track.
Councillor Dyer, would you like to come back?
Yes, I mean, in terms of the AI, I mean, I'll let Tim come in a moment, but I mean, just to emphasise this is a pilot and it's looking at that. And I think there is a case to be made. It exactly goes to your point about not diving head on or headlong into AI. I think AI does have a lot of potential, but I would say that because I come from an IT background. But I do think that the way forward is we want to test it out for ourselves, and if we can do a pilot in which, if it doesn't deliver, we get our money back, that seems a bit of a no-brainer to a certain extent. And it also then, we're either, having tried the pilot, we'll then decide, well, hang on, this isn't the magic silver bullet we thought it was. On the other hand, we might find that it opens up avenues and opportunities for us further down, because one of the things we do know, we are facing severe increases in need in some areas, and we are seeing the NHS, for instance, and elsewhere starting to make more use of AI. But I agree that we do have to be that element of cautious. Probably because I read too much Isaac Asimov as a child as well. iRobot. And I think, in terms of the other things you mentioned, I mean, as I said at the beginning, these are options that are coming forward. One of the reasons why I've been here, not just for my bit about strategy and resources, but also for listen to the conversation of all the others, is I am really here. I mean, it sounds like that horrible politician cliche, but I am here to listen and to take note. I'm also conscious, you're right, I'm from Hartcliffe, you're no Western, and Ever's background as well. We have personal experience of how important some of these support and provision can be. And the other thing I also wanted to sort of just highlight, but before I do that, I'll let Tim, do you want to comment on the AI?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Dyer. Yes, AI, I would say in terms of that debate about cutting edge and bleeding edge, I would say in innovation terms, we're probably in fast follow, I think it's generally referred to, which is quickly following people who've already had a go. We are very cautious about the sort of leaping with both feet, and to give you a sense of the scale of that, in some councils that really do feel they're at the forefront of this, those kind of investment numbers are in the tens of millions. If I was here today asking you for licensing council-wide for Microsoft's Copilot toolset, for example, I'd be asking you for a number between £2 and £3 million. So this is very much the pilot and test. The helpful thing about that for us as well is there are other authorities that have done that, and we're well linked with them. So we're getting the evaluation reports, the project closure reports from councils that have had a go with some of these technologies. We're able to take their learning into these trials and de-risk them to a degree. So whilst we've absolutely got eyes open to opportunities, we're for example, putting some quite innovative AI into the customer call centre in January under a different project. But again, that's following a couple of councils who've done that first and who've shown us their evaluation results. So it's clearly a fine line that we need to walk, but we're doing our best to strike that balance.
And then the final thing I was going to say is about the council tax reduction scheme. I'm trying to think of a way to phrase this the right way. It's not a council tax reduction scheme and how that may change that I'm particularly interested. What I'm particularly interested is making sure that we give the best possible support to those people in low-income households. And if we can do that in a way that doesn't need modification of the CTOS or does need modification of the CTOS, as long as what we deliver is a better outcome for those people on low incomes, then I'll be happy with that.
Just one quick thing. Does the registered office increase fees mean it's going to be more expensive to get married?
You haven't even asked me.
These are statutory fees that we have to apply, and we have no choice. We've already implemented it, Councillor Blake. It came in within the current financial year, and we are not seeing any decrease. In fact, we're seeing increases in the volumes of births, marriages, citizenship ceremonies. There's a lot of business that goes through the register office, and it's contributing to an in-year surplus in that area.
Thank you, Councillor Blake. Being chair, I've had to leave my questions to the end. Most of them have been answered. Just a couple of things, please, Councillor Dyer. One is the increased supplier incentive scheme income target. I see that as a potential saving, but there must be a risk of default on payment. And how is that mitigated? And how is this spread? Is it spread over many suppliers? Is this £165,000? Or is it just based on one or two suppliers?
Sorry, Councillor Malik, I missed the beginning of that.
So the increased supply incentive scheme income target. So basically this is a incentive where suppliers will basically be allowed to pay a bit. You as a council will pay early, and we get a discount for it. It's 165,000. It's quite significant in the small sums. What's the risks? And is this based just over one or two suppliers, or is this lots of suppliers?
Well, basically, we've already taken out the contract. So a bit like the last one, this is one that is already being implemented. And the first year's target was about 100 and, Andy, I don't know if you know, I think about 132,000. We think actually that this 165 might actually be an underestimate, but we wanted to be conservative, small c, conservative, Jonathan, about our estimates on this. I don't know, Andy or Sarah, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, just to add that it's a voluntary sign up by the suppliers. Obviously, we encourage it, so it is spread over those suppliers that voluntarily sign up to that process.
Thank you for that. And then the last one is the registry office operational efficiencies. What I'll say is, within Bristol, it's really difficult to register a death or birth, find an appointment at the right time. I know there are some special provisions for emergencies and people that need, especially a death certificate in an emergency, but also the citizenship as well. And a lot of people that are waiting for the nationality certificates to apply for their British passports. And if they can't get an appointment, it will take a lot longer. So these efficiencies, I'm sure it's calculated, but can you just reassure me that they've taken all those things into account? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Malik. Yes, these are things to improve the front-facing customer experience, and I will feed back those specific comments to the team. I'm told that the bookings for appointments get snapped up really quickly, and it's a challenge, but they are trying to be as flexible as they can to serve all the residents that want to avail themselves of all of those services. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dye, can I ask you to sum up, maybe make some final comments, and so then we can go on to the last committee. Thank you.
Okay, I will endeavour to do that quite quickly. I think, first of all, is just to say that these are only indicative options. Nothing has been decided, and that was the purpose of this meeting, part 1 and part 2, was to hear from the Finance Subcommittee and also from members of the public. The other thing I just wanted to point out that our numbers so far are based on the provisional local government finance settlement. That is not the final local government finance settlement. We won't know that for some time. So if any of you know an MP with links to the Cabinet or Treasury, please, if you want to drop them a line and say, can they look favourably upon Worcester, then that would be very helpful, and I may be encouraged to buy you a drink. And that's not bribery.
Thank you very much. We now turn to the final committee that has 2 parts. So the Homes and Housing Delivery, and then the HRA, both covered by Barry Parsons, Councillor Barry Parsons. I'll hand over to Councillor Barry Parsons.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the committee for the opportunity to present these budget proposals. A safe and secure home is really sort of the first health service. It's the foundation for a healthy life, and this budget reflects our absolute focus on ensuring safe and secure homes, particularly for the most vulnerable people in Bristol, and the unprecedented challenges that we face in achieving that in the grip of an ongoing housing crisis, both nationally and particularly acutely in our city. As Councillor Malik said, there are 2 parts to the budget proposals for homes and housing delivery, the General Fund and the Housing Revenue Account, each one reflecting a key priority. In the case of the General Fund, our key priority here is around tackling the homelessness crisis, and in the case of the Housing Revenue Account, the HRA, this is ensuring that our residents are safe and feel safe in their homes. There are clearly, in such a vast budget, there are many aims that we try to achieve with these, but these, I would say, are our top 2 priorities for this year's budget, and I'll cover each in turn. The General Fund proposals, as I said, relate to homelessness, and in particular they reflect the priorities of our newly adopted homelessness and rough sleeping strategy and our cross-cutting tackling homelessness programme. Rising levels of homelessness since the pandemic and the cost of living crisis present a huge challenge to the city and to the council. With over 1,600 households in temporary accommodation, that's a huge financial pressure. Over £8 million of demand pressure over and above a £6 million budget. And in particular because of a phenomenon called subsidy loss, where the government doesn't reimburse the full cost of providing temporary accommodation when we have to buy it in the private sector. That's an enormous cost pressure for us. But of course, homelessness also leads to worse outcomes for people, in particular if they end up being placed in unsuitable accommodation like hotels and B&Bs. So the general fund proposals cover a range of spend to save measures, which are designed to both reduce our expenditure on temporary accommodation and also provide better outcomes. I broadly divide it into two areas, prevention and accommodation. So on the prevention side, we're redesigning our housing options service and our commissioning to focus on early intervention and preventing homelessness and helping people move on from homelessness. Working with a range of partners, as is our practice in Bristol. This is a very connected sector, and we work with a broad range of partners to achieve these outcomes. In particular, we've got quite a focus on accessing the private rented sector at the moment. On the accommodation side, we're doing innovative work to provide better quality temporary accommodation that's also cheaper for the council and comes with support attached. So we're increasing our use of registered providers. We're purchasing 75 homes is the proposal through the General Fund for use as temporary accommodation. And we're also proposing working with a modular homes provider on a leaseback scheme for 50 more temporary accommodation units. I'm going to turn now to the housing revenue account. So this is a ring-fenced account whose income mostly comes from council tenants' rents, and it's spent on council housing. That's all it can be spent on. Particularly in Councillor Thomas's case, I feel like I'm teaching the committee to suck eggs, but since Councillor Thomas also sits on the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee. So the context here really is shortly after I became chair of the newly established committee in May of last year, the council received a damning C3 judgment from the regulator of social housing, which said that there are serious failings in our council homes which require significant improvement to put right. I really can't stress enough how serious these failings have been across a range of areas, including a large backlog of repairs to our homes, safety inspections not completed or evidenced, thousands of outstanding damp and mould cases. Councillor Dyer and I immediately apologised on behalf of the council for these failings. We've acknowledged that the service our residents have been receiving hasn't been good enough, and we've committed to putting things right through a major programme to improve safety and consumer standards across all of our homes. The bulk of these homes are over 60 years old, so the cost of works is high, and increasing all the time as our assets age. All these problems we think have built up over many years of underinvestment under previous administrations and national governments. But we're in a new world now, both nationally and locally, with nationally regulated standards that we're held to account for rightly by and on behalf of our residents. So it now falls to us to act to put these failures right. And the budget proposals before you reflect this commitment. We have to balance the budget to ensure that we've got the right finance in place, and we have to protect the safety, the health and the well-being of people living in council homes within our prudential borrowing limits and so forth. That means making some difficult choices, and we have to prioritise necessary spending. So we are proposing millions of pounds of investment to bring our homes up to the standard that residents rightly expect. This includes over £21 million of investment in our high-rise blocks, 19 million on day-to-day repairs, and millions more for fire remediation, increasing electrical testing, fire sprinklers, combating damp and mould, gas servicing and safety, making sure our fire doors are working effectively, improving our fire alarm testing regime, and we're also investing in surveys to better understand the condition of our stock so that we can plan the right investments for the future. I'm going to move now to a couple of points that I know members of this committee will be interested in. One is around new social and affordable homes. So first of all, I want to reassure you that we're committed to maximising the supply of homes, particularly for social rent, but also other affordable housing products. And we've adopted a new interim affordable housing delivery plan to that end. And we're investing to build new council homes. So we've got over 700 new build council homes in the pipeline. By any standard, we have an ambitious council house building programme at a time when investment, specifically in council homes by local authorities across the country, including in London boroughs, has dropped off a cliff, really. But we're prioritising the homes that we're best placed to build and manage ourselves. So we are proposing to review the Gorham Homes pipeline, see where some schemes might be better delivered through partnership with a housing association. Looking to deliver the same similar mix of social rent and affordable homes, which would be available through Home Choice for people on the housing waiting list, and securing new investment into Bristol from housing associations while protecting HRA investment into our existing homes and delivering the schemes that the council is best placed to manage. I also want to address disposals because there's been some misleading numbers circulating in the press. We are proposing to develop a policy to manage HRA assets in a sustainable way. This is something that's common practice across local authorities. This council doesn't have one. As we heard earlier in the discussion about sheltered housing, there's a number of properties in our estate that we could well be doing better with. And the service has started to identify some properties. Primarily we're looking at non-residential properties, also properties that may be costing us a lot of money compared to the benefit they offer. And we're talking about potentially disposing of handfuls of properties as part of a responsible asset management structure. So the assumption is no more than 14 next year. We've also started, and really for the first time, to ask service managers in a planned way to identify genuinely deliverable efficiencies in how we provide services to our residents. We think managers and staff on the ground are best placed to identify how we can do things better. And they've risen to the challenge, identifying 8 million of savings for next year. Proposals including examples of innovation, like using drones to investigate problems with our homes rather than the cost of erecting scaffolding. Introducing planned programs of work, so we're reducing reliance on response repairs, and streamlining the relet process. So all this work, I think, is designed to help lay the foundation for a housing service that's fit for the future. I want to pay tribute to the tireless work of so many people who've been active in bringing forth these options for a balanced budget, particularly the finance team, leaders and officers across the whole of the housing service and the council, and the members of the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee who've engaged in a really lengthy process to get us to this point. I commend these proposals to you and I'm happy to receive any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Parsons. This time I'm going to start with Patrick and then go to Councillor Thomas. So Patrick.
Thank you. It's getting deja vu from yesterday's session now. I thank you for that presentation, Councillor Parsons. There's a lot here, and some of it is really good, like the increased efficiencies, the innovations, and it's very interesting to see how that's come from the workforce. It shows the value of a bottom-up approach, I think. To touch, you've mentioned we're investing in fire safety, electrical testing. I know things like just general maintenance, which hasn't been done in the past and has led to a safety issue as well as costing more. That's all really good, but we've got proposals here for making savings on a lot of those, like fire alarm testing, sprinkler system maintenance. How those the narrative and the papers, could you explain just how those add up, please, in case it's not quite coming through to us?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that these proposals have been developed really is by focusing on the things that we must do in order to deliver those nationally recognised standards around safety and the consumer standards more broadly for the residents who live in our homes. So what we're really doing is focusing on delivering the stuff that means that we're able to go from where we are at the moment, which is that according to the regulator of social housing, we're at a C3 rating. It means we're not complying with the basic standards that we need to bring us up to where we're we're at a C1 rating, so we would be fully compliant with all of the requirements, particularly around safety, where we've been identified to be failing, and that really is what we need to be focusing on at the moment. I'm going to ask officers if there's anything that they would like to contribute to add a bit more detail and flesh on those bones.
Chair, shall we provide some more detail?
Yes, so the question was about the, how the equations work on this, because it's £8 million saving, but it's been spent on houses. How does this all make sense in the budget?
Sure. So I think the question, Councillor, was particularly towards the housing revenue account, rather than the general fund savings, which Councillor Parsons has also talked about. So there's significant investment still in the housing revenue account, Chair. I'll just run through some figures. This is not an attempt to, it's just a sort of, I think part of the question was to try and understand the scale. So the proposals for next year for the housing revenue account still include 21.6 million investment in high-rise blocks, 19 million in day-to-day repairs, 4.3 million investment in fire remediation works, 2.8 million in increased electric testing, 2.5 million in fire sprinklers, smoke alarms and cladding replacement, 2.4 million to combat damp and mould, 2.3 million for gas servicing, 1.5 million to ensure fire doors are working effectively, 0.7 million increased fire alarm testing, and 0.7 million to better understand the condition of our stock. So, Chair, there's significant investments, as Councillor Parsons said. They are focusing really on that, almost directly correlates to the headings in the consumer standards around safety. So that is there's significant investment going in those areas. There have been significant other adjustments as well, particularly around new housing delivery. Those the Chair has also explained. There's significant delivery still there, and we do still have, as part of our budget proposals elsewhere, a proposal to invest, to borrow to invest in acquisitions through the general fund linked to temporary accommodation, as well as all of the general fund linked to temporary accommodation proposals. But hopefully that gives you a flavour, Chair.
Councillor McAllister.
Thank you. That's helpful. I'm just going to jump around a bit more and then we'll move on to other councillors, I imagine. On the service charges that we're looking to bring in, I don't think people will object on principle to the idea of charging people for the services and utilities they use. That's pretty standard. I do want to make sure, given that people who live in council properties are often a lot sort of more economically vulnerable and already likely to be in receipt of other benefits and forms of financial assistance, will people be able to afford this, or are we just going to see people being sucked into a cycle of debt and enforcement action from the council?
So, first of all, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that the introduction of service charges is intended to make sure that residents in our council homes are paying for the services that they receive. We think that's fair, and that they're not paying for the services that they're not receiving. It's worth saying as well that all of these charges are eligible for housing benefit, universal credit. So in the case of the majority of council tenants who receive those benefits, they will be covered. So they won't see any change in their circumstances at all. But I think more broadly, the sort of the point about debt, the point about enforcement action, we are really looking to change the way that we work with residents. To make sure that they don't fall into debt in the first place. We're offering a lot of support around that, and we are where the practice has been in the past that because rent was able to be paid in arrears, there was the possibility that people could fall into debt through really their tenancies not being managed effectively. We're tightening up on that an awful lot, making sure that people have the support they need to avoid getting into debt. And we have a whole series of services within the council, including the Welfare Rights and Money Advice Service, which support tenants to make sure that they can manage their financial affairs effectively.
Thank you. That's reassuring, and it's good to hear that we've got those services available for council tenants. Moving to another issue on the potential disposals of HRA properties, will this not lead to just higher costs in the long run if we've got to then house people who were living in those properties privately, if we've got to pay commercial rates for that? What will happen to those existing tenants if people are living there currently? And I do feel like, just on a general point about the processes, the EQIAs for a lot of these proposals were bundled, and I think for something like this, not to say we need more EQIA pages, but I think in this particular instance it would be really useful to have those separated out so we can examine the proposals discreetly.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, I mean there are absolutely no proposals that would deprive somebody of their tenancy. That would be that would be unthinkable, really. As I said in my introductory statements, the majority of the assets that the team have been looking at for potential disposal are things like commercial assets. They're non-residential properties. So this is really not something that will impact on residents in their homes. I think that's important to say, isn't it?
So, sorry if I could. Apologies. I know I'm taking lots of time here. Yeah, you know what? No, fair enough.
Says them at the end of the queue.
Sorry. All right. Okay. I'll very, very quickly. I just want to point out, it's been reported in the press. We're paying £14,000 per property for conveyancing on the 75 properties we're purchasing for temporary accommodation. That seems extremely high.
I'll leave it to officers to answer that one, I think.
Chair, if I'll come in on that. I'm not aware of that figure. I would have to take it away, I'm afraid. That doesn't sound right, but I will look at it.
Okay. Councillor McAllister, can we move on?
Yes. Sorry.
Yep. Okay, thank you. I haven't been strict in chairing at all. I think the discussion is important, but we do have 15 minutes for this meeting. So if questions have already been asked or points have been covered, let's move on to something new. Thank you, Councillor Thomas.
I'm not sure how coherent my thoughts are after these two marathon sessions, but I'll try. Yeah. Thanks very much, Harry. I think it's worth being aware of the level of impact of the increased building safety costs and the knock-on impact on that of us being able to build our own homes. And I think that the way that we're looking at trying to make sure that the building starts and building completion and provision of affordable homes and affordable rent and social rent, I think a good job is being done in the face of that unpredicted but essential expenditure. I've got a concern that we still haven't got a handle on just how big those building safety costs are going to be. So I think when we're setting the budget, I think we'll need a kind of just a note of caution around that. And I think kind of picking up on something that has been coming through in the private sessions is just making sure that we've got the data on those affordable housing starts, that what's going to be available for affordable rent, social rent, new builds, whether we're building it or whether somebody else is building it. So yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks, Jerome. It's worth saying as well that our housing delivery team report annually on affordable housing figures. So that's something that we'll be able to review in the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee.
Councillor Brown, do you have any observations or comments?
Yeah, I've got an observation and a question. The first is, I don't envy, the balancing between the general fund aspect of this, the use of council houses for temporary accommodation, the impact that then has on the HRA. I don't envy the sort of squaring of those circles, so to speak. I welcome this, all the measures about reducing the voids, and I want to ask about the feasibility of that. So it says in the slide deck that the planned reduction against void losses for this year was not met because of workstream being redirected to clear the backlog of repairs. So, you know, I appreciate that. That's happened. It then says planned reduction assumed over the first 5 years of the plan from 120 days at present to 70 days in 25-26. Now, is that suggesting that we're going to go from 120 to 70 in this coming year? And is that really feasible? Because that's a substantial reduction. Great if we can. Or is that the target over the 5-year period? I guess that's a question.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, I think sort of I'll let Fiona, or I'll let John answer in detail in that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's worth saying, I think, that historically the council has had targets for reductions in void loss that have not been met. And so the approach really now that we're taking is that we are looking to adopt targets that are feasible, that are achievable. But I'll let John come in.
Chair, come in on that. Yes, to answer your specific question, Councillor, it is in next year, that target. It is a less demanding target than was set last year, which we weren't able to meet, but that was a diversion of resources. It is still quite challenging. However, it is against the context that even that improved target would still be above a sort of national average. So it is a very important area for us because, of course, it enables us to use the homes more quickly and also recover rent. It's good financially as well. So Fiona and the team have been working very hard on this to improve the process, and I think there's a lot of that is about the early work to try and progress things as quickly as possible before the work can be carried out as well. So we are obviously in very constrained resources across the board, but we've set as Councillor Parsons has said, what we think is a realistic but challenging target, and we will work to achieve that.
Councillor Blake.
Thank you. We're almost there. Thank you, Barry, for your presentation. Just a couple of things about the... I mean, it's definitely right that our organisation needs to get better, right? It's sorting out these repairs, sorting out checks and the rest of it. I just want to set some level of context here. And it's absolutely right that the standards changed, which meant that quite a number of councils now are failing in this space. Nottingham, Newcastle, there's quite a number that are in the same place as us. And I think it's fair to say, though, that during Marvin's period of time, he did put money into this space. You could argue it wasn't enough, or you could argue, we didn't prioritise this area as much as we should have done. I mean, ironically, I think most political parties used to sign up to the HRA budget and thought it was a good budget. So in some respects, we've had consensus, where we haven't had budget consensus on anything else, but on the HRA we've tended to have consensus, and because there was a balance between building new homes, putting capital into that, and repairing. So I think there's a bit nuanced really in this argument. Definitely we need to improve it. The issue now, I think, that you've got is a performance issue with the housing team. And in a sense that we got to step up. Previously, with the budget that we gave for these types of improvements, it was underspent, so it wasn't always spent. So there's a big performance issue here, I think, really, that needs to be resolved. We need to put the money in, absolutely. We need to get on with the jobs and improve it. But I thought it was really important to have a little bit of context between where we were and where we are, because it's slightly nuanced and we've had political consensus around that. But absolutely we need to resolve the issues. So agree with that. Can I just come to disposals? I'm not going to talk about anything else, right? Just disposals. In the HRA, there's some supplementary information, 25-26 HRA budget. It says that we've currently got 700 non-residential properties and 1,222 residential properties that are increasingly expensive for us to maintain. And there's talk about the capital receipts if we could dispose of those. There's a real issue really around timing of all this and understanding a bit more of the detail. We haven't got that detail at the moment, right? And so our worry is that there's a whole raft of questions then associated with this potentially. Are we going to auction them off? What's going to happen if they're not good? If they're expensive to maintain now, right? Then when we auction them off, are they going to just go to the private rental market and then we're going to have, substandard properties in the private sector market, which we know we've got a massive problem with already. So there's big questions around that, which I'd like to kind of have a bit more of information about. There's also the sort of the retrofit. I mean, I thought actually the Green Party were the sort of kings of the promotion of retrofit and getting some of these difficult properties actually retrofitted so they could work. So I'm wondering why, in essence, you are looking at this disposal issue when actually what we should be doing is doing our best for those residents and those properties and being exemplars in this space, showing that what can be possible rather than just offloading these properties, which I think if we do that, it'll be particularly difficult. We could end up with substandard properties, private sector. If we go to auction, you've got to be a cash buyer. So, there's going to be the potential for profiteering in that. So I think there's a whole raft of questions when it comes to this that we're probably not going to unpick here. But we would welcome a further conversation because I think that we could end up potentially. I hope we're not going to do a fire sale where we end up, losing opportunity.
Thanks, Kelvin. I mean, to your first point, you said it was arguable that under previous administrations, not enough money was spent on maintaining our homes. I mean, I would argue that. I think the spend wasn't right. It wasn't effectively targeted. That's why we're in the position we're in now, and we really need to recover from that, and we need to change how the service works, and that's why we've been through a strategic review of the housing service. That's why we're looking to appoint a new executive director for the service, really raise the profile of housing across the council, make sure that it's treated as a top level priority as it ought to be, and really ensure that we're hitting all of those standards that our residents rightly expect. On the point about disposals, that's precisely why we're proposing developing a policy. So rather than sort of simply looking to sell off assets in a haphazard manner, the necessity is to make sure that we have a strong policy behind that. And that means that we can be intentional about these decisions, rather than adopting a blanket approach that we won't dispose of anything from the housing revenue account, even if it's not serving a purpose anymore.
Thank you, Councillor Logan.
Kelvin's right to say that there was political consensus for the role of council housing, and about 12 or 11 months ago, the last review of the HRA business plan was, I think, agreed unanimously, and was a concept of how development and improvement and growth of council housing was an important part of Bristol solving its own problems, and we have to think about why that's changed or what's changed, because there have been changes in both directions. Some of the changes that the new government has made have made by inflation, CPI +1, or by reviewing the approach of the right to buy, makes housing growth more possible rather than less. And we've had the regulatory judgment, but as Kelvin says, this is not enormously surprising. and we are not the only city in that situation. The improvement of quality of housing management services is really important. Residents, tenants have the right to the service that they are paying for, but you don't achieve that by making a service smaller. You achieve it by making it better. So we're worried about why that's changed, what the concept is around that. But the more important thing is we need to be able to see the thinking about this. I mentioned, Abdul, yesterday that we need to be able to see the thinking and the analysis. And for the HRA business plan, that's more important than for any other area. The nuts of the HRA business plan is a complicated spreadsheet that says over 30 years what the value of these decisions are and what the impact is of disposal or acquisition. Because this time last year, we were proposing to acquire 200 properties to the HRA rather than 75 to the general fund. And now we're potentially looking at a significant disposal. And those decisions have consequences. The figure of 1,200 properties to dispose is not a figure that's been made up or leaked out of a committee unprofessionally. It's a figure that came in the papers for this meeting. And if you're announcing that figure is now 14 rather than 1,200, everyone will be over the moon. But if you're announcing that it's 14 next year and 1,208 the year after, that's catastrophic, because that's not a service that is meeting the housing need in Bristol. But we also need to see the consequences of that, because if we do lose 1,200 properties, there is a consequence of that for the rental income to the HRA. We haven't seen those figures because that analysis hasn't been shared, but our back of an envelope analysis says that is going to cost at least £6 million over the value of the HRA business plan. Now, we need to see if that's true. We need to see the impact of those decisions, because we need the HRA to be sustainable. It doesn't get sustainable by being smaller. So that is our biggest worry. The second thing I wanted to touch on was the potential to withdraw from growth. So the point of Gorham Homes is to build properties that wouldn't have been built otherwise, and to expand the availability of affordable housing for vulnerable people in Bristol. If all Gorham Homes ends up doing is building houses for housing associations to operate, you would question is it adding the value to the city that it was created for? The point of those things is to help Bristol solve its own problems. And if we withdraw from that agenda, we withdraw from meeting the need of our communities. So that's what we want to understand, the implications of those things. So what I would ask, Barry, is that you share the thinking behind those things, and that you share the analysis of the impact. And that doesn't have to be today, it doesn't have to be out loud, but it does have to be amongst the people in this committee, so we understand the impact of the choices that were being made. Because if we end up with an HRA that's not sustainable, or the council can't afford to operate, or that doesn't meet housing need, that's not the decision we all think we're here to make. And we need to see the thinking behind that in order to understand the implications, because meeting housing need is as important as the perceptions of the service itself.
Barry, I'm going to ask you to come and respond, but can I ask members for a 15-minute extension to get to the end of the meeting? That will give us enough time to have the discussion as long as we need to get to the bottom of this.
City Hall, the staff normally.
Maybe I should have asked Ian first.
Do we have the ability?
Can we extend for 15 minutes, and do we have the right and the permission to do so?
5 minutes? 10 minutes? Sorry, I just want to check.
I mean, it's not going to be 15 minutes, is it? It'll probably be less, but just to be, yeah.
So I just don't want people thinking they're walking out the door and they're waiting.
So shall we continue with the meeting? Otherwise, they're going to delay it further. Barry.
All right. Well, in the meantime, I'll try and respond to at least some of Rob's points. Thanks for those challenges, Rob. I think it's it's important to have these discussions, and it's important that we debate this stuff. You asked what's changed.
Sorry, Barry. I think there's a point of order, or Councillor Thomas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Continue.
What's changed? I mean, first and very obviously, what has changed is Grenfell. What has changed is the death of Awab Ishaq. You're right that there are national challenges facing social housing, facing stockholding authorities like us. What's very clear is that the old way of doing things was not okay, and led to unacceptable levels of risk for people living in our homes, some of the most vulnerable people in our communities. And so, I make no apologies for the fact that we're determined to invest in the homes where the majority of our council tenants live and will continue to live, for the future, even if we massively expand new council house building or new social house building. We absolutely have a duty to ensure that when we're providing a home for somebody, that home is safe, and that's really guiding the choices that we're putting before this committee. So I think that's I think it's really important to say that that kind of the new regulatory regimes, the new consumer standards, they reflect a new understanding about what our responsibilities are as a council landlord. So that's the first thing. I think that's what's changed. And if you speak to anyone across the sector, those things are at the forefront of people's minds, and rightly so. And then on the point about the sustainability of the housing revenue account, on the financial issues that you mentioned, I mean, we discussed this actually at the escalation panel, didn't we, Rob? And you yourself said that the investment in Baltic Wolf, for example, £90 million of spend, with an expected return of £38 million across the life of the business plan. So, if you were building council homes as a way to provide financial return, you'd be it would be a really business. This is not this is not why we build council homes. So I think it's important to say that as far as the sustainability goes. The same is true now as has always been, really, that in order to build new council homes, what is required is support from national government primarily. So we're looking to the affordable housing settlement that comes in April, and we will be looking to take full advantage of that, both to deliver our own council-owned homes, but also in partnership with registered providers and across the region with the combined authority.
Councillor Hucker
said he wants to make a comment, so I'll.
No, sorry. Jerome, did you want to come in with something?
Speak to this point because I think that what Councillor Logan is asking for, what he's challenging, is rather than the proposals themselves, is the kind of the financial modelling and the financial detail that's sitting behind it. And I'm not quite clear what you're asking for in terms of that additional clarity. And if that's becoming a kind of condition of Labour's support for these proposals in the housing, in this housing discussion, then we really need to understand, please, what it is that you're looking for on the financial modelling. Because if you're challenging that, then we need to be clear how you're challenging it, so that Councillor Parsons can, and the team can put that together to show you and to give you comfort.
Okay.
Councillor Logan.
Well, I'm not sure what a condition of our support. There are probably a number of things, and I would probably say not disposing 1,200 properties is high on that list. But I would like to know what you're saying today in terms of is that not on the agenda now? That is the absolute pointy end of the spear in terms of being confident that this HRA is sustainable itself, but also is meeting the needs of residents. But before you do, on what I'm asking for. To understand the HRA business plan, I'm kind of looking at John here, and John is probably trying to look at people who do this for him. But there is a large and complicated spreadsheet model that proves to someone's confidence the sustainability of the HRA over 30 years, which we haven't seen. So either we need to be given a view-only version of that we can see and play with, or we need to have a private session where it's talked to specifically, because each of these assumptions each of these choices make huge differences over what the council housing service will be able to do in not just 2 years, but in 5 or 10 or 30 years. Because those are the things that determine whether debt is valuable. The debt that we have over 20 or 30 or 50 years.
Yeah, Councillor Logan.
You need to see those assumptions. We haven't seen the working, so we can't honestly say whether this proposal is good value for money.
Can I suggest if we can maybe respond to that? Can officers maybe respond to help?
Yes, Chair, certainly. So the councillor is right that there is an underlying financial model which assumptions are built into, and different assumptions can be built into and give different results. The way it has been done in the past, I believe, is that the assumptions are set out very clearly, and then the results of that are made available. And that detailed paper will be coming through the SNR process. I think the agenda briefing's next week, isn't it? And it'll be available for that and reviewed in the usual process. So we will be doing that.
Thank you very much. I think that's pretty clear then. So that's the kind of platform that it will be available. Councillor Logan, is there anything else? Can we move on?
If we're not looking at disposal of 1,200 properties, that's a huge deal, and people need to know that, because it affects how people perceive this work. If that is something that we're looking at, but we're not looking at, but we're not sure yet, we need to know.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're not looking at disposing of 1,200 properties, next year or the year after, or whatever. The working assumption that the service has at the moment is that we would be looking to dispose of no more than 14 assets next year and 28 the year after that. It's a
thank you, Barry. That's pretty clear.
Number in the context of the wider HRA.
It feels like we're doing our job then. But.
Thank you, Councillor Logan. Is the questioning finished? Councillor Hucker for final. No, then they got Councillor Mack.
Thank you. I'll be quick. Clearly, the regulator's report has caused you to go back to the drawing board and sort of rethink what your priorities are and what you can deliver. And I appreciate that must have been a huge amount of work. I can only take it on trust that the solutions that you're proposing are the most effective solutions within the constraints within which you have to operate. Although I'm quite surprised that I'm surprised to hear that such significant assumptions as the number of properties which are proposed to be disposed of are changing by such a large amount. I can't quite understand that. I'm not sure if I think I need to see the calculations in the model, because even though I'm an accountant, I'm not sure if I would understand them. Some people used to say that the management accounts model that I had wouldn't be understood by Stephen Hawking. It may be, maybe I wouldn't understand this model, I don't know. And perhaps I'm just taking too much on trust. But I do realise that you've had to go back to the drawing board and come up with a new set of assumptions within a relatively small space of time. And I don't underestimate the challenge that you faced in doing that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hucko. Councillor Mack, do you have any comments, observations, or questions?
I wasn't going to say something. I just think we've got to almost about £1 billion in total spend of the council. And even, you know, my position, I'm on this committee, but also as deputy leader, I overlook a lot of that, and I look into a lot of committees. And it's a really interesting point, that point of trust, and what information do we have and what detail do we get to go into, and how much can be presented and what do we get to see, and can we go in and play with the spreadsheet. But I think ultimately we do, you know, there's that relationship between us and officers, and being able to follow through from this person does this job and it costs this much to the next budget above, the next budget above. And I guess we just all have to accept what level of that detail and what level of that trust we're going to have. And I totally acknowledge you want a bit more. I can totally hear you want more on this, but whether you'd get to you're playing with a spreadsheet, I mean, let's see what can be presented. But we're never, no one person in this council, I don't know, maybe I look at Andy, maybe Andy's going to get to that point of knowing, being able to say, well, I know exactly what everything costs and how it all adds up. So I guess we all just need to work out how do we look at, understand, trust, and, you know, have a good enough idea. But then at the same time, we're talking about HOA in previous years and whether we trusted HOA in previous years, and turns out actually the repair, the state of repair of our properties, and what we were spending on that and whether it was good enough, I guess wasn't there, and that was something that wasn't picked up and that we didn't know until it sort of came out to this year. So actually there's a bit of information that we didn't have enough. Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to not take up time, but then I feel the need to talk, so I'll hand over to Barry.
I agree with that, Heather, and a lot of that is performance information. So one of those things is stock condition. So what is the condition of the stock? A question mark. But also a commitment was made a little while ago for stock condition surveys, and actually we haven't had the volume of stock condition surveys that.
Sorry, Councillor Logan.
So that is another level of trust, isn't it? That you have to have confidence that the decisions you make will influence.
Shall we allow Councillor Parsons to reply and maybe sum up as well in your final deliberations?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the recent discussion was about the provision of information. I think it's probably worth saying that some of that is just about the annual rhythm of when information is provided to councillors. You know, the HRA business planning documents and so forth are historically they're released slightly later on in the process than now. So that's I think that's where a lot of this discussion comes from. And yeah, I mean, on stock condition surveys, you're absolutely right. I mean, there had not been a programme of stock condition surveys. We've instituted one, and we're looking to start getting the results from that reported later this year. And one of the things that I think is really important related to that, and something that I'd like to end with, is that those condition surveys, really understanding the condition of the homes and the assets that we own, that is going to be crucial to us as we look to develop a strategic approach to managing the whole of our HRA assets, all of our homes across the city. Something that has not been the case really in the past again, and so we're in the process, I think, of recovering and laying the foundations for a future for our council homes particularly, but for housing across the city, that takes a much more strategic, a much more long-term view, that actually looks at how we can maximise the supply of new homes, but how we can also make sure we never fall into the trap of having a very large set of ageing assets that lead to the kinds of problems that we've seen developing in ageing council estates across the country, and particularly in Bristol. So we're looking to develop a much more sort of future-facing, I think, model how we think about homes across the city. It's not just about, you know, moving on to the next building site and slapping on a hard hat. It's really about trying to understand how we can have homes that really address the dynamic needs of the city as we develop.
brilliant note to finish on. Thank you very much, Councillor Parsons. I'm now going to turn to the report's recommendations. So there was a report that was attached to, that we saw yesterday. It was a part of the bundle of today's papers as well. So the subcommittee for finance, number 1, notes the process undertaken to date by the finance subcommittee in its role to support budget development. Number 2, notes and reviews the draft saving proposals for the general fund. Number 3, notes and reviews the draft saving proposals for housing revenue account. And number 4, undertakes to deliver a report update to the meeting of Strategy and Resources Committee on the 3rd of February 2025 to outline the methodology and engagement of the Finance Subcommittee throughout the budget development and review of savings undertaken, including any observations and savings development to Strategy and Resources. And obviously that's going to inform the leader and in turn will be voted on at the Strategy and Resources Committee. In the course of our deliberations, we have complied with recommendations 1, 2 and 3. Recommendation 4 asks us to deliver a report to the 3rd February meeting of the Strategy and Resources Committee, and Ian is going to be working very hard to get there. Myself and Councillor Hucker will assist. In terms of the next steps for this, our comments have been noted and will be summarised into a draft report. I would suggest it would be appropriate for myself and Councillor Hucker have said to initially review the report. The report will then be shared with all members of the subcommittee for feedback and comment so that a final version can then be included as part of the agenda pack for the 3rd February meeting of the Strategy and Resources Committee. That leaves me just to thank everybody for being here today. Thank you very much to the Subcommittee of Finance for all the work that you've done up to now. Obviously, there is going to be a reflection and a review process, and we're going to look to make this process better for the future. I would like to thank that single member of the public who has sat here but has disappeared now. We haven't had the opportunity to thank, so interested in democracy and our budget. All the officers that have attended and made themselves present, and especially like to thank the Leader of the Council who's been here for 6 hours, 3 hours yesterday and 3 hours today, to be more informed and to deliver for this city. In terms of today's meeting, thank you very much, and I hope and pray that we can get to a resolution on the 25th of February that's in the interest of this city, and I apologise for any shortcomings on my behalf. Thank you very much.
Thank you.